Many Christians today are unaware of the history of Sunday laws, the persecution of believers by the Antichrist power on the earth, and Christian nationalism. Today we're going to see how these very important historical precedents intersect with current events so that you and those you care about are not deceived. Welcome to the show, everybody. This is the Dance of Life podcast, and I'm your host, Tudor Alexander. Thanks so much for being with me today. Make sure you subscribe on my website. And if you're on YouTube, hit that like button. It seems to do something these days. But either way, subscribe on my website. That's the best way to stay in touch and see all of my material in an ad-free format when it comes out. Or if you want to access different libraries that I've put together with a lot of different episodes, a lot more organized than YouTube, make sure you check it out, danceoflife.com. Now, today we are continuing our Sabbath series. We're just about done. I have this episode planned, and then next week, which is going to be Sabbath number 9, how the Sabbath is fulfilled in Christ. And that's it. And I'll tell you, I didn't realize that there was so much to talk about with the Sabbath, and yet here we are. There is so much to talk about because, as especially I hope you will learn in this episode today, the Sabbath is going to be very, very relevant to our generation. More so than I think probably any other generation, because this generation will see the mark of the beast. Now, we are continuing on a series here, so if you haven't seen some of those previous episodes, especially the last one, where we talked about the history of Saturday and Sunday, go check it out. Very, very important episode. It's a longer episode, but anytime we're dealing with history and understanding how we got to where we got, it is very important to document yourself. Unfortunately, most Christians do not know their history. They really don't. And as a result, they run into error. Now, history is not a salvation issue. However, if you realize that history in this particular case is going to be repeating itself, and it will be a salvation issue if you take the mark of the beast, then history, it behooves you to know your history. Now, I believe everybody whose God is determined to save is not going to take the mark of the beast, but I don't know who that is. So my job as somebody who has been shown the truth on these things is to put the message out there, and whoever will listen as usual. But it's a very important topic we're discussing today, so make sure you watch the previous episodes, especially number 7 and the first episode in this series, Why the Sabbath Matters, because it's all going to come together. Today we're going to cover a lot of history in the last 2,000 years, because you need to understand the patterns. You need to see how the snake has moved throughout history, because the snake is moving very rapidly in our current time. So we're going to cover history first, and then we're going to cover current events, just literally within the last, I'm recording this video in March of 2024. Literally just in the last 3 to 4 months, you will see how much action is going towards this particular outcome. There's a lot going on. And people who are busy watching Israel all day, or Ukraine, or whatever else the media is throwing at you, they're missing these very important realities that are shifting. And eventually it will shift so suddenly, at least it'll seem suddenly, that people will just go with it. So don't be one of those people. Use the timestamps if necessary. This will probably be another one of those with parts, because there's just so much to talk about. There really is, but it's all fascinating stuff. So I really hope you'll stick with it, because it will be very edifying to you. I promise that. Now, also some other important episodes that I will mention that kind of all help to paint this picture. This week that I released this particular episode you're watching now, Sabbath number 8, I also released a very important news update, which, again, for me, the news updates aren't about covering the news. They're about teaching you principles to build your understanding on principles so that you have right judgment. But nonetheless, we looked at some very, very important current events concerning the swing from dark to light, which really is from the secular left, woke kind of culture that everybody has been following for decades into now the conservative right, politically across the world. The episode is called Two Kings, One Table, which plays off of what Daniel 11 talks about with the King of the North and King of the South. Very important episode. Watch it so you understand what's happening, because the world is shifting dramatically, and they're laying the groundwork politically so that what I'm going to share with you today in this episode can be implemented spiritually. You have to understand this. There's also my End Times series, Dark to Light, number 22, and that talks about this whole dialectic that's happening. And also another Dark to Light episode called The Pope's Pet Dragon, I believe, and that's about China. So you'll see between all of these how the entire world is it's actually pretty insane to see how well they're organized to be able to pull all this off. But they are pulling it off because God has decreed it. He has given them the ability to do that so that they will be destroyed and so that they will test the elect. So pay attention, confirm your election, and learn the truth on these things so that you aren't deceived. Now, there's a lot of things to discuss, and the first most important thing to talk about is, what does the Bible actually say about the end times? This is a very important topic, and we're going to jump to scriptures and take a look at the context for everything else. All right, in this opening part, I want to set the stage so you are very clear as to how the Bible paints the end times. Because unfortunately, many are getting caught up in this swing from dark to light and believing that we are headed towards a golden age, towards a world peace situation, towards we the people taking back the power, towards, taking down the deep state and all these other things. And there's a lot of cultural things happening. Watch my episode in End Time series called Jesuit Hollywood, where the people in celebrities are being converted seemingly to Christianity. Everybody's all about Christianity now. Revival. There's, these Christian clubs for teenagers now popping up, purity clubs. I mean, it seems like the culture is becoming Christianized, and that's a good thing, right? The gospel's spreading. Well, not so fast. You need to be very understanding of what the Bible actually says about the end time. So that's why I want to open this with some very important scriptures. Matthew 24, "For many will come in my name, saying, I am the Christ, and they will lead many astray." This is about the end times, because obviously many, many more false Christs have come in the time period between after 70 AD to today, than the time period between when Jesus said this, probably around 30 AD, 31 AD, who knows, to 70 AD. Because there's a lot of preterists who say, well, Matthew 24 doesn't concern us. Well, it's a double fulfillment. Obviously, there's been a lot more false Christs. You can look it up on Wikipedia how many false Christs have been. The amount has increased drastically as we've proceeded through time. But false Christs will come and deceive many. Now, later in Matthew 24, Jesus says, this is verse 10, "And then many will fall away and betray one another and hate one another." Keep this in mind, because it's going to become very relevant very soon. "And many false prophets will arise and lead many astray. And because lawlessness will be increased, the love of many will grow cold." So people will betray you, people will grow cold, people will be seeking for themselves, and there'll be many false prophets deceiving people. John 16, verse 2. "They will put you out of the synagogues. Indeed, the hour is coming when whoever kills you will think he is offering a service to God." Now, of course, this was directed at the apostles. That was the first fulfillment of that. Very obviously relevant. However, keep in mind that we are being conformed to the image of Christ. And obviously, just like the apostles, we are under these words, in the sense that if you look at history, and you will see it today, that people have been persecuted in the name of God, and been persecuted for being quote-unquote heretics, for not obeying the particular power in question, which, of course, if you've watched anything that I've created, you know is the Catholic Church. There is a time coming when people will betray you and kill you in the name of God, thinking that they're doing service to God. So keep all of this in mind. Acts 20, verses 29 through 30. I know that after my departure, this is Paul speaking, fierce wolves will come in among you, not sparing the flock. And from among your own selves will arise men speaking twisted things to draw away disciples after them. Therefore be alert, remembering that 3 years I did not cease night or day to admonish everyone with tears. So Paul knows that after he departs, we're talking very early church, the devil is extremely busy and is getting to work very early on. 2 Peter 2 verses 1 through 3, false prophets and teachers. But false prophets also arose among the people, just as there will be false teachers among you, will be, future tense, who will secretly bring in destructive heresies, even denying the master who bought them, bringing upon themselves swift destruction. And many will follow their sensuality, and because of them the way of truth will be blasphemed. And in their greed they will exploit you with false words. Their condemnation from long ago, which by the way means that this was all predetermined by God, is not idle, and their destruction is not asleep. Now, a lot of people get their feathers ruffled when I talk about predestination, but I will say that I have a whole series planned on it at the time of this video. If you're watching it from the future, then maybe it's out already, so check it out. If we reject what the Bible plainly says about predetermination, we will run into many, many errors. But that's not a can I'm going to open up right now. Nevertheless, the Bible consistently tells you that both the good things and the wicked were predetermined by God to reveal his glory. The cross was predestined, meaning the people who nailed Jesus to that cross were also predestined. So that is something to consider. But Jude 1 verse 4 says the same thing. For certain people have crept in unnoticed who long ago were designated for this condemnation. They were appointed to creep in and deceive people because the elect must be tested. The false converts who went with them and accepted their false heresies were never real converts. That's the point. Ungodly people who pervert the grace of our God into sensuality and deny our only Master and Lord Jesus Christ. So look, you have a situation where very early on in the church, there was false teachers, false prophets, false doctrines already. The devil was extremely busy immediately after the cross. 2 Peter 3 verse 3 through 4, knowing this first of all, that scoffers will come in the last days with scoffing. How many scoffers are in my comment section? Quite a bit. Following their own sinful desires. They will say, where is the promise of his coming? Forever since the fathers fell asleep, all things continue as they were from the beginning of creation. Oh, yeah, there's going to be scoffers about the return of Christ. There's going to be scoffers about, no, you're stupid with your Mark of the Beast being Sunday thing. That's not ever going to happen. Oh, Christian nationalism is never going to take over Europe. I've had that one. And literally, again, if you watch my last episode, you can see that Europe is all swinging to the right and getting prepared to be Christian nationalist yet again, after 1,400 years of being Christian nationalist. So there's a lot of scoffers, and the Bible warned you about that. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verses 1 through 4. Now concerning the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ and our being gathered to him, we ask your brothers not to be quickly shaken in mind or alarmed, because why? Why did he say this, by the way, before I continue? Because there were false letters, believe it or not, that were counterfeiting Paul's words in trying to teach people false things at that time, which was literally like a few years after the crucifixion, very shortly afterward, relatively speaking. There were already counterfeit apostles, counterfeit letters going out, and Paul was fighting these deceptions and saying, listen, do not be shaken by these false things. Why? Either by a spirit or a spoken word or a letter seeming to be from us. You get the point? The devil is already working hard to counterfeit, to the effect that the day of the Lord has come. Let no one deceive you in any way, for that day will not come unless the rebellion comes first, i.e. the falling away, and the man of lawlessness or man of sin is revealed, the son of destruction who opposes and exalts himself against every so-called God or object of worship, so that he takes his seat in the temple of God, proclaiming himself to be God. Now, there's a lot of people who are deceived about what this means. I have a whole end time series dedicated to this. This is not talking about a Jewish temple that has to be rebuilt where sacrifices are going to be offered, so then some charming guy, whether he's an atheist or a communist or a rabbi or whatever, is walking into that temple and proclaiming himself to be God. That is not what this is talking about. Paul is referring to the little horn power that Daniel saw, that everybody knew would come and rule for a very long time. So he's reminding them, listen, there's a time marker for these things to be fulfilled. The day of the Lord will not come until this very important power takes control, because that power rules until the very end, until the return of Christ. Very, very important. And of course, that power is the papacy. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verses 9 through 12. The coming of the lawless one is by the activity of Satan, with all power and false signs and wonders, and with all wicked deception for those who are perishing because they refuse to love the truth and so be saved. So the coming of the lawless one is by the activity of Satan. Verse 11 and 12 say, therefore God sends them a strong delusion so that they may believe what is false, in order that they may be condemned, who did not believe the truth and had pleasure, but had pleasure in unrighteousness. So those who were appointed to never believe, they are appointed to be deceived, and they will be. I don't know who those are, and I don't know who the elect are. That's why I do what I do, for the people who will listen. But nonetheless, strong delusion, deception, great signs and wonders by Satan. 2 Timothy 3 verses 1 through 5. Godlessness in the last days, but understand this, that in the last days there will come times of difficulty. For people will be lovers of self, lovers of money, proud, arrogant, abusive, disobedient to their parents, ungrateful, unholy, heartless, unappeasable, slanderous, without self-control, brutal, not loving good, treacherous, reckless, swollen with conceit, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, having the appearance of godliness, but denying its power. Avoid such people. Now this last part where it says, having the appearance of godliness is a very interesting statement, especially considering current events and everything I've covered with Christian nationalism, Jesuit Hollywood, the Christianization of culture. It's the appearance of godliness, but it's actually denying its power. What's the power? Well, the power is the gospel. That is the power of God to change the human heart. But of course, we live during the abomination of desolation, where it has set itself up between God and his people. So people do not go by the sanctuary. They don't go by the way. They go by the counterfeit, and so they deny its power. They have the appearance of godliness, but they deny its power. 2 Timothy 4, verses 3 through 4. Popular verse, for the time is coming when people will not endure sound teaching, but having itching ears, they will accumulate for themselves teachers to suit their own passions, and will turn away from listening to the truth and wander off into myths. Isn't that describing practically YouTube? And in general, Rumble, all these places that people go, TikTok, for their theology. This is what is happening, folks. Revelation 13 and 17 are two other important chapters. In Revelation 13, you see the image of the beast being built, and people come to worship the first beast because of it. Why? Because the false prophet deceives them into doing this abomination. Revelation 17, the kings of the earth give their power to the woman riding the beast, which is really the Catholic Church in control of this governmental worldwide system. It's a new world order, and it's going to be a Christian nationalist federation. Just like it was in Europe, it's going to be now all over the world. So what do we take from this? Well, we take that the Bible is very pessimistic. Another important thing to remember is that Christ was persecuted for basically doing things on the Sabbath. He was basically persecuted for quote-unquote breaking the law of God. That's what they accused him of doing. Of course, he wasn't. And he always told them to use right judgment. But he was heckled and persecuted by the Pharisees for, supposedly breaking the law of God. And again, in the name of God, they were persecuting him. Do you see the point? We are conformed to the image of Christ as believers. So, isn't it appropriate that the mark of the beast is going to have to deal with the Sabbath and persecuting eventually people by saying, you're breaking God's law. You're not resting according to what God said. Well, God never said Sunday. Watch the previous episode. But Christians throughout history have been falsely accused, as you will see, of breaking God's laws and not obeying by not submitting themselves to the Antichrist power. So what's the point? The point is that your end times views are extremely important, and that the end is not an Islamic caliphate or a communist dystopia, but a Christian nationalist world order under the Catholic system. Whether that's going to have a false Christ or just a pope, who knows? I really don't know. It'll be interesting to see how all these things in the Middle East are boiling down and how they're going to integrate everything. I've talked about it in other episodes, but the point is you need to be aware of the future. The future is not optimistic, not in the short term. Sure, when Jesus returns, very optimistic, maximally optimistic. But until that point in time, it is pessimistic. And it gets even more pessimistic as time goes on. You need to be aware of that. Meaning, very important now, that if you accept what the Bible says, and we've gone through about all of the things that are very key passages about the end times, if you accept that, and you see that things seem good, that they're shifting, of course they are shifting, and there's good guys coming to rescue you from the bad guys, what does that mean? It means that the people who are coming to quote-unquote rescue you are actually the final bad guys that the Bible actually warns you about. Not Klaus Schwab and, Yuval Noah Harari and eating crickets and, whatever, all these other globalist schemes. It's realizing that the future is Christian nationalist, which will obey, which will enforce obedience. And this is the thing to get out of this. But most people are deceived on end times. So that's why, again, I'm going to point to my end time series. You need to learn the truth. Because the question is this: is it possible that you've been deceived on the topic of the Sabbath? Is it possible that Sunday and Sunday observance, Sunday keeping, as a counterfeit, will be part of these final tests, especially the mark of the beast? Is that possible? Of course, if you've seen this series up until this point, then you realize it is not just possible, but it's going to happen. Especially the last episode. And today I will also add to that evidence to hopefully nudge you over the edge so you realize the importance of this. The last episode we saw the history of Saturday and Sunday and the problem with the calendars and how they got changed, how Sunday evolved really out of a pagan practice ever since Nimrod, observing the sun and paying homage to their solar religion, and why that's so important. But today we're going to look at a deeper dive into what the meaning of this Sunday is to them and how they've enforced it throughout time, both in the current day and in history very early on, even before 321 AD, believe it or not. Sunday has always been their day, and it is the counterfeit that the devil will obtain worship by when the mark of the beast will be enforced. So, with that, let's go to part 2 and talk about the history of Sunday laws. Okay, so this is going to be part 2, and we're looking at the history of Sunday laws, all the way from the very beginning of the church, the first century, all the way through up until modern times. Now, when I say modern times, I mean like the 20th century. And we're going to look at current events in the next part. Now, this is from a website called cgi.org, and it's titled Who Changed the Sabbath to Sunday? And we're going to be doing a lot of reading so you can get a lot of context. And these are great resources. I'm not going to read all of them, but we will take a look at what they have to say. The watering down of the Sabbath in the first 300 years. Some of these may overlap as well, so just be aware of that. But they're going to go from different angles so you understand a full picture of what's going on historically. The Christians during the Apostolic era from about 35 to 100 AD kept the Sabbath on the designated seventh day of the week. For the first 300 years of Christian history, when the Roman emperors regarded themselves as gods, Christianity became an illegal religion, and God's people were scattered abroad. Judaism, however, was regarded at the time as legal, as long as they obeyed Roman laws. Thus, during the Apostolic era, meaning like the first century or so, Christians found it convenient to let the Roman authorities think of them as Jews, which gained them legitimacy with the Roman government. However, when the Jews rebelled against Rome, the Romans put down the rebellion by destroying Jerusalem in 70 AD, and again in AD 135, which I believe was the Bar Kokhba revolt. Obviously, the Roman government's suppression of the Jews made it increasingly uncomfortable for Christians to be thought of as Jewish. At that time, Sunday was the rest day of the Roman Empire, whose religion was Mithraism, a form of sun worship. Now this, I'm not too sure about this. Sunday did exist. If you saw my last episode, Sunday did exist. But it was the second day of the week. And they had two calendars. They had the 7-day calendar and the 8-day calendar. So the 7-day calendar, let's assuming this is talking about the 7-day calendar. The 7-day calendar, Sunday was the second day of the week. But they might have rested on that day. I'm not 100% sure about that. But just so you're aware, Sunday was not the first day of the week until 321 AD. Nevertheless, it was always dedicated to the sun. There was always a day dedicated to the sun. And in the Roman Empire, Mithraism was the particular religion in question, which got imported into Christianity to create Catholicism. But anyway, since Sabbath observance is visible to others, some Christians in the early 2nd century sought to distance themselves from Judaism by observing a different day, thus blending in to the society around them. During the empire-wide Christian persecutions under Nero, Maximin, Diocletian, Galerius, Sabbath-keeping Christians were hunted down, tortured, and for sport, often used for entertainment in the Colosseum. If you did not know. So when you go to Rome and you go to this Colosseum, remember that a lot of Christians were killed and tortured and made fun of in Roman times. When Emperor Constantine, a pagan sun worshipper, came to power in AD 313, he legalized Christianity and made the first Sunday-keeping law, his infamous Sunday enforcement law of March 7th. Remember this date? It's going to be extremely important. March 7th, AD 321, just the day and month. It'll become relevant as we go on. It reads as follows, quote, "On the venerable day of the sun, let the magistrates and people residing in the cities rest, and let all workshops be closed." The Sunday law was officially confirmed by the Roman papacy. The Council of Laodicea in AD 364 decreed, quote, "Christians shall not Judaize and be idle on Saturday, but shall work on that day. But the Lord's day they shall especially honor, and as being Christians shall, if possible, do no work on that day. If, however, they are found Judaizing, they shall be shut out from Christ." Now, of course, if you were shut out from Christ, you were a heretic, and that means you had to be punished by death. Do you see how this works? Now, here's an important point to be made before we move on for all the people that keep spamming my comments and saying, no, Christians never celebrated the Sabbath before 321 AD or whatever. They never celebrated the Sabbath, let's put it that way. If they never celebrated the Sabbath, then why is there so much historical evidence that Christians were persecuted for celebrating the Sabbath? And why were they told not to Judaize unless people were already, quote-unquote, Judaizing by actually going with the seventh day? Once Saturday had become the seventh day, and the Jews observed it on Saturday because that's when the new seventh day was, they were going to pay allegiance to Rome, the Christians who were loyal to the Word of God also celebrated on Saturday because it was the seventh day. And of course, we talk about all of this in the previous episode, but nonetheless, there is more than enough evidence to prove that people were celebrating the Sabbath up until even before 321 AD. Of course, they were afterwards too, but they got persecuted for it. So, very important stuff. Now, let's look at this one called the Sabbath Sentinel. And it's basically another thing about history. And again, March 7th, remember this particular date, because recently, as of March 7th, 2024, something very interesting happened, which, as you'll see, it's all by design. But let's see what it says. In Latin, the phrase translated as Venerable Day of the Sun is Venerabili Dia Solis. Constantine's law was based upon honoring and esteeming the celestial body we call the sun. The Mithras cult was a favorite for the Roman emperors, especially Constantine. He minted coins as late as the 320s, honoring Sol Invictus. Now, this is an important timestamp, and you need to realize this because people who think that Constantine was a church hero, they don't know their history. He minted coins as late as the 320s. Keep that in mind. The invincible sun god, yada, 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 on some of these coins. He was crowned by Sol. We have an example of the coin below. So here's a coin where he has got his Roman emperor face. This is, mind you, in the 320s. Keep this in mind. This is after he'd legalized Christianity as a cult. And after a particular event happened, which we'll look at in just a second, called the Battle of Milvian Bridge. It's after, many years after, that he's still doing these pagan things. So he's got a face of himself being a emperor, and then he's got Sol Invictus on the other side, giving him the crown. Now notice here as well, for this topic, because this seems to come up too, The solar cross that the Knights Templar used, that the Pope still has on his thing for their solar religion. Of course, the people make mention of this because they say, see, the cross is a pagan symbol. The cross is not a pagan symbol. The cross on my hat is not a pagan symbol. The solar cross is a counterfeit. Yeah, it's a pagan symbol that's been used for sun worship and Baal worship. Absolutely. Baal was the god of the sun, and they use little solar crosses. But there's a difference. There's a very big difference. The solar cross is equal sides. Everything is equal, and it's got certain characteristics to it. The actual cross of Christ that we see, like for example on my hat, one bar is longer than the other. The vertical is longer than the horizontal, so you know exactly what it's pointing to. Because if the one that's vertical is longer, that means it's sticking out of the ground. To get the point, the cross is a beautiful symbol, and I have a whole episode on proving that he was crucified on a cross, not a T-shaped cross, not a stake, but an actual cross. And the cross was actually foreshadowed in many things in the Old Testament. So for people who don't have that distinction, because this comes up with the whole Sol Invictus, sun-worshipping cult that they have, people get that truth, but then they get deceived by, oh, you see cross as a pagan symbol, then you start hating a symbol of your own faith, which is just really stupid. But anyway, don't be deceived. Please don't be deceived on this. But nonetheless, 320s. Constantine was doing these things. On one side of the coin, you can see Constantine's face. The inscription reads Imperator Constantinus PF, short for pious and happy. On the other side, yada yada, it tells you basically the Sol Invictus, which means Sol Invictus, my companion. Now again, this is after he legalized Christianity as a cult in the Roman Empire. He also, by the way, had coins. When I've shown this one before, he had coins with the letters of Christ, the what's it called? I forget the name now, I know, but there's the Chiro, that's right, the Chiro symbol. And on one side, that's supposed to signify Christ, but then on the other side, it had the sun god on it as well. So that should tell you everything that you need to know. There's also a cross symbol beside the sun deity. The coin was minted in 316. So a few years after he had his Milvian Bridge battle, which we'll look at in just a second, which was several years before his famous Sunday Law, he struck coins with Jupiter's likeness on them as late as the mid-320s. So he's still doing pagan stuff after he legalizes Christianity as a cult. While Constantine's decree did not change the Sabbath, it created a civil day of rest beside it. Very important. The devil went slowly, step by step, very meticulously to create this counterfeit. His first Sunday law also did not force any sort of worship on his subjects, though the law itself was dedicated to the sun. That's also an important distinction. Because Constantine didn't force people to worship, but he created the foundation for this counterfeit. The Catholic Encyclopedia states, quote, "Many of the emperors yielded to the delusion that they could unite all their subjects in the adoration of the one sun god who combined in himself the father god of the Christians and the much worshipped Mithras. Thus, the empire could be founded anew on unity of religion. Even Constantine, as will be shown farther on, for a time cherished this mistaken belief. Many other actions of his also have the appearance of half measures, as if he himself had wavered and had always had in reality to some form of synchronistic religion." This is coming straight from the snake's mouth. Catholic Encyclopedia is telling you the truth. So realize that these things are the foundation of what has happened and what people believe today. Now, this is the Battle of Milvian Bridge. I've talked about this many times in various episodes. I'm not going to mention it too much. It's when Constantine experienced a supernatural vision of light, and a cross of light, and all these different sun-related signs that deceived him into believing that he was listening to Jesus. And he was basically motivated into doing all these various things like uniting church and state and creating this counterfeit system. So it's very clear if you study this particular vision that he was hearing from the devil or from an evil spirit designed to deceive him into the next thing. Remember, Christians are getting persecuted like crazy. And so the advent of a Sunday law that would give them rest from the persecution is exactly what Satan wanted, dark to light. This is the whole point, is that he was torturing them, getting them ready for the counterfeit, and then presenting the solution. Problem, reaction, solution. But anyway, the Battle of Milvian Bridge took place in 312 AD. Why is that significant? Well, it's significant because 8 years, even probably up to 10 years or more, after this supposed conversion experience to Christianity, he was printing coins with the sun god, my companion, on them, with Jesus' supposed letters on one side and the sun god on the other. He was doing a lot of pagan things. So I don't know if Constantine was ever saved. Some people say he converted on his deathbed, but who knows? Either way, he was integral in creating this counterfeit. And you have to understand that he was really the first kind of pope, really. The papal institution wasn't there yet, but he was the first Pontifex Maximus that was also kind of the head of the Christian cult. So he held both positions. He was the pagan high priest, Pontifex Maximus, from the tradition of the Babylonians through the Romans. And he was also now the head of this particular new cult, which in this case was Christianity. So he really set the stage for the marriage of these two things. And we talk about that in the previous episode, number 7, where we talk about baptized pagan. I'm going to sneeze. Okay. Whew. That was a toughie. Man, I think I have some dust in my... We have so much dust here in Arizona. It's just crazy. But anyway, let's go to the next one. This is the Sabbath Sentinel again, and we're looking at Sunday laws in the later Roman Empire. So now we're in the 3rd, 4th century. In the 4th and 5th centuries, a series of Sunday laws were enacted in the Roman Empire. Whether that was the intent of these laws or not, whether that was the intent of these laws or not is unknown, but we know that these laws were used by the Roman Church to point people away from the true Sabbath. Either way, it was used, so who knows whether it was intentional or not. As we have reviewed in previous articles, the first national Sunday law in history was passed by Constantine in 321 AD. Keep in mind that this law did not apply universally to all people in the Roman Empire. Farmers were exempted from it. After researching a little further, we find that Constantine relaxed this Sunday law for special Roman market days. And they cite the particular source. So it wasn't completely universal when Constantine said it. He just set the stage for it. He changed the order of the days. He made Sunday the first day to honor the sun. Of course, he was already honoring the sun, but it's got to be the first day. It's the most important, for them at least. Whereas for the Christian, the 7th is the most important, very important. But nonetheless, he also created this law that most people had to rest. And it wasn't like punishable by death or anything. It wasn't, the snake, you have to understand, the snake moves and gets in position. He's very careful. He gets into position first, then he strikes. That's why you got to pay attention to this episode, because he's getting into position. And there will come a time when he will strike, and if you're not prepared, then you'll be eaten. Moving on. The second detail about this special law is that it had no connection to Jesus Christ, or Christianity, or the Holy Bible. Constantine was a sun worshiper, and his law was to honor the sun, was simply just behavior consistent to his belief system. One important development that did occur during the reign of Constantine is the interweaving of the Roman Empire and the Roman Church, which we also refer to as the Roman Catholic Church. Constantine used the Roman Church to bring more subjects into obedience to the state. He de facto made the Roman Church an institution of the state. He and other Roman emperors codified Roman Church practices into Roman law. That's right. And when Justinian's decree in 538 AD basically made the Pope the Grand Poobah, that's when the papal 1260 years began, which ended in 1798. But anyway, they even went so far as to regulate some practices. We have some examples below. Let's see. In 326 AD, he passed a law that granted the Roman Church special privileges. All other Christian groups were not allowed these privileges and were bound to public service. He regulated the number of clergy in Christianity. Secular judges were even required to enforce the decisions of Christian bishops. Isn't this something that will be repeating itself? Pay attention, folks. You think this happened 1700 years ago? It doesn't concern us. There is nothing new under the sun. The Bible tells you that history repeats itself. Ecclesiastes 1 verse 9. One of my favorite books of the Bible. Such a beautiful book. But nonetheless, history repeats itself. In 379 AD, Theodosius became the Eastern Roman Emperor, and after hearing the perspectives of different Christian groups, he sided with the Roman Church. All houses of prayer were taken away from other Christian groups and given over to them. In 380 AD, he passed a law forcing that all peoples under his rule follow the Roman Catholic religion. You see how the snake works? It gets in a position, then it constricts a little harder, a little harder, a little harder until it chokes the life out of you. In 386, Theodosius instituted a Sunday law which was different than those enacted by Constantine. He was the first emperor to implement a Sunday law and attach Christian meaning to it. Theodosius' relationship with the Roman Church would pave the way for celebrations of the Roman Church, including Sunday, to be enshrined as established Roman law. Little by little, the little horn power was creeping up out of the fourth beast, which is Rome. From 386 to 469, there was 7 laws enacted that specifically regulated some aspect of Sunday rest or worship. 386 by Gratian, Valentinian, and Theodosius. 389 by Valentinian, Theodosius, and Arcadius. 392 by the same rulers. 399 by Arcadius and Honorius. 409 by Emperors Honorius and Theodosius II. 425 by Theodosius II and Valentinian III. And 469 by Emperor Leo I. All of these were Sunday laws that increasingly got more and more focused. Let's put it that way. During these years of the later Roman Empire, Sunday was cemented as the day of rest in the Roman Empire. This affirmed the position of the Roman Church as the preferred religion of the empire. It diverted people away from the true Sabbath, which is, now I highlighted this on purpose because I want to show you that even when you get good information, that you always, I've never found anybody that has a complete truth on this. Even when you get decent information on history and things like that, what do they tell you? Let's read. It diverted people away from the true Sabbath. Yes, okay, good. So far I'm with you. You've shown me so much evidence, which is Friday sunset to Saturday sunset. Loud buzzer, please. It's not sunset to sunset. This is a Babylonian Talmudic tradition. Watch my episode number 4 in this series. That's why it's there. But you see, this is the problem. People give you information, but then they give you something that's not true. The day is not reckoned from sunset to sunset, folks. God is not going to start the day with darkness. Seriously. The laws passed from 386 to 469 would have a significant impact in the Eastern Empire and other parts of Europe for centuries to come, in some ways down to our present time, which is true. You will see, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that this is very, very true. Now, this is from an Adventist website, which, again, I'm not Adventist, but Adventists have great documentation on these things, and some of these things will overlap with some things that we've read previously, but it's designed to look at it from a different angle. So this is from an Adventist site called Adventist.org. So let's see what they document. The teachings and traditions of the Church Fathers. In the early 2nd century, a new generation of intelligent and influential church leaders emerged. So now we're kind of going a little bit back in time. So we're recapitulating. So this is now like 2nd century, before 321 AD, before the Sunday Law. These are commonly referred to as the Church Fathers. Justin Martyr was one of the leading names in the 2nd century. And others like Polycarp, Ignatius, Dionysius, Theophilus, Irenaeus, Origen, Cyprian, and Tertullian followed in the years and centuries that followed. These were known for their genius, eloquence, and devotion. Some of them even died as Christian martyrs. And as they wrote and taught, the believers began to look up to them for guidance, just as they did to the apostles. Very important to understand. The only problem was that many of them came from religions other than Christianity. True, they were pagan converts most of the time, and they let their prior influences affect how they interpreted Scripture. This is going to be an exceedingly important point in the series that I have planned after this series, which is the afterlife, and realizing that the whole thing of having an immortal soul that persists after death and going to heaven or hell for eternity is actually a Greek invention because of this sentence that I just read. Because they brought their beliefs, their pagan Greek beliefs, into Christianity, and Christianity became fused with all of these non-Christian ideas. But I digress. Eventually, they integrated pagan practices into Christianity. With time, these practices became rituals and then traditions. In the end, many began to regard these traditions just as highly as they did the scripture as their standard of faith and practice, which they still do today, especially if you're Catholic or Orthodox. Most of these things started innocently, but they ended up affecting key beliefs and practices of Christianity. Now, another point to make is that a lot of the church fathers, by the way, were subordinationists. They didn't believe in the equality of Christ with the Father. You have to understand that whenever somebody cites the church fathers this and the church fathers that, they were all over the place. I'm not questioning necessarily some of their salvation because they were martyred, but they were deceived on a lot of things. They didn't understand, the Trinity. They didn't understand, various things. Like, for example, Augustine had some great things to say, but he also had some really horrible things to say too. Because of him, we have monasteries. And we have, he was very much a Christian nationalist and pro, Roman church state authority. So, there you go. And Protestants love Augustine, which is ironic. Anyway, creeping corruption starts in the time of the apostles. The apostle Paul had seen signs of this corruption starting to enter the church in his days. Writing to the Thessalonians, he told them that the mystery of lawlessness was already at work in their time. Now, we looked at some of these texts in the first part, that, the mystery was already at work. The devil was very quickly going to work after the cross. He knew that the time had been appointed for him to be judged, so now it's time to get to work to get worshipped. So it was very much at work in the very beginning of the church, and as you can see, that was a very specific sequence of light to dark, dark to light, deception, persecution, back to deception, a little more persecution. It's the ping pong game from hell, and really, it's what the devil uses to manipulate you into his agenda. This says the Sabbath until Emperor Hadrian's edict in AD 135. So again, now we're recapitulating, but just to get more angles on this. Between the destruction of Jerusalem and AD 135, the Christians from Jerusalem maintained the Sabbath observance. So we have another source testifying to this. But in AD 135, Emperor Hadrian destroyed Jerusalem and expelled the Jews and Jewish Christians. Then he prohibited practicing any Jewish rites, like circumcision and Sabbath keeping in his empire. These Christians from Palestine spread throughout Asia to form the Eastern Church, and even with the prohibition, they still remained faithful to the true Sabbath. Before this, Jerusalem had been the center of leadership for the early Christian church, but with this dispersion, the center of leadership and influence shifted to the church in Rome, the capital of the Roman Empire. Rome and the origin of Sunday worship. Generally, the Jews and their religious practices were looked down upon by the Romans. And after the persecution of Christians went through under Emperor Nero, the church in Rome didn't want to be on the wrong side with the Romans. So, with Hadrian's edict in place, the Christians in Rome were more vulnerable to turning away from the Sabbath than ever. Slowly, they preferred to set aside the principle of the Bible and unite with their pagan neighbors. This is going to be repeated again in our lifetimes. Pay attention. And for the sake of peace, they even allowed them to join Christianity, though most of them had never planned to fully convert. Then some of them even rose to positions of leadership and became church fathers. There you go. And with the Sabbath on the spot, because it was one of the prominent practices of the Jews, they began to turn the Christians away from it. They led them to the substitute of the Christian seventh-day Sabbath, what they always had practice, which is Sunday observance, or Sunday, the day of the sun. Saturday, a fast day. Sunday, a feast day. This shift was accomplished by slowly turning the Sabbath into a gloomy fast day and making Sunday a feast day. I've talked about this and I'll talk about it again, but the weekend is also a subtle subversion because the weekend is a double attack on the Sabbath. It makes Sunday seem as the great day that you get to rest, and Saturday is the day that you do all your work or your partying. So it's a double attack on God's word. To have a counterfeit day of rest where the devil is basically receiving worship, and Saturday is the day where you're partying or you're doing work, you're doing your errands, and so you're also breaking God's law. So it's a double attack. Anyway, why Sunday? Because Sunday was the official day of rest and feasting for most pagan religions, from the ancient Germans, Saxons, and Egyptians to the Romans. It was a day dedicated to the worship of their chief god, the sun. Remember, all this stuff started with Nimrod. It's ancient. It's as long as it's old as time. That's why it was named Sunday. And to show their patriotism and support for the Roman government, the leaders of the church urged the believers to take part in those Sunday festivities. This is still before 321 AD. A good example of these leaders was Justin Martyr. He was a secular philosopher before joining the church and becoming a church father. He once wrote a letter to the emperor mentioning 3 times that Christians did assemble on Sundays. Now, why do you think he did that? Look, we're playing along. Don't persecute us. Yes, the sun. We have the sun too in our Christianity. You get the point? When asked why they did it, the leaders had to figure out some agreeable reasons. They decided on 3. First, it was the day that Jesus resurrected. Oh yeah, we have a reason, because Jesus resurrected. But in actuality, again, I'm going to stop here as well. Remember that the day that Jesus resurrected, it was Sunday for the Romans. But remember that when Jesus resurrected, the calendar was different for the Romans. Sunday was the 2nd day of the week for the Romans. Saturday was the 1st day of the week. So keep that in mind. It was a memorial for the beginning of creation in Genesis 1, and you'll see these points coming into play. And strangely, they began calling it the 8th day, coming after the 7th, making it superior and signaling a new beginning. Yes, a new beginning. That's the thing that's going to suck people in and seduce them into this Sunday observance, a new thing based on their interpretation of the end times events. It represented the dawn of a new world after the era of sin in this present world. Yes, it'll be a new world. It'll be a new world order that will enforce this particular day very soon. Moving on, but the truth is that none of these reasons were supported by the Bible. They might sound nice, but there is no direction in Scripture to make such changes to the original 7th-day Sabbath honored throughout the Bible. They just had to come up with a few things to sound like solid reasons. Apart from promoting Sunday as a day of feasting, they also made the Sabbath a day of fasting. And despite the opposition of Eastern Christianity and several Western churches, the Church of Rome also championed the fast in other Christian communities. So you see, it's always a double attack. Not only do they have to create the counterfeit, but they have to make the Sabbath a burden. And somehow, either through fasting, in this case, this is the old, the first tradition was to make it a fast. And today with the weekend, which is making a burden of pleasure, meaning you're burdened by your own sin to go out and party and or to do your errands and things like that, and anxiety. You're burdened somehow. And this is the point. The devil is attacking God in 2 ways. By this, the Bible Sabbath was degraded while Sunday was exalted. Very important point. Then in AD 200, another church father named Tertullian, which by the way was also a subordinationist, outrightly referred to the 8th day Sunday as the Lord's Day. So this was all, even before 321 AD, these things were starting to be compromised because of the persecution, because of all the dispersions, because the Church of Rome was starting to get more power. Because again, God had decreed these things. The little horn was sprouting from the 4th beast, and it was going to take over. But the little horn was sprouting. The other churches and the other groups of Christians were basically being marginalized. And this is, remember, for the people who keep saying that Christians didn't celebrate the Sabbath, you need to realize that history is written by who? The winners. The history is always written by the winners. So in order to determine history, this is why we need to read so much, because you have to learn what history actually says. It's there, but the history you find quickly is the one that's written by the winners. So you have to understand these things. Now, if we fast forward, now this is Sabbath in the Middle or Dark Ages from the 5th to the 15th century. Most of the Christian world honored Sunday as the Sabbath, or, quote, the Lord's Day between the 4th and 17th centuries. There were some who kept Saturday along with Sunday to avoid persecution, just like they did in early Rome. But there were a handful of believers who remained faithful to the Bible and the true Sabbath. Example of these groups are the Sabbatians and Syrians in Syria, late 4th century, the Celtic Church under the leadership of Patrick, Columba, and Dunuth. This was, I don't know when, but the new Christians in India, 17th century, the Aksumite kingdom in Ethiopia throughout the Dark Ages, the Waldenses in northern Italy, the Vaudois in France, the 12th century, the Cathari and Petrobrusians of France, this is the 11th century, the Pasagini in northern Italy in the 12th and 13th centuries, the Picards in Bohemia, 12th century, the Lollards in England, late 14th to 15th centuries, in Norway and Denmark, the 15th century, The Judaizing movement in Novgorod, Russia, a result of the teachings of Lithuanian Jews between 1470 and 1475. And by the way, all these people were exceedingly persecuted. So just so you're aware. The Sabbath and the Reformation from the 16th century. The Protestant Reformation began with Martin Luther in Germany and quickly spread across Europe. As time progressed, many other reformers joined the movement. When it came to the question of the Sabbath keeping, many of the major reformers like Luther and Zwingli were Sunday keepers. Yeah, Luther had a lot of Luther did some good things. I'm not questioning anything about Luther in terms of his salvation. I think he was a genuine Christian. But Luther had a hard time breaking away from Catholicism. He really did. If you read some of the things he believed, it's like with transubstantiation. And it took him a while to break a little more from Catholicism. But he was a Catholic friar or a monk. Anyway, but there was some Reformation groups that made major changes toward keeping the Bible Sabbath. We'll look at 3 of them. Sabbatarian Anabaptists in the 1500s. Anabaptists believed in baptizing adults in contrast to the papal practice of baptizing babies. They were mostly Sunday keepers, but some of them kept Saturday. This is the group that became called Sabbatarian Anabaptists. They were spread across Europe with Oswald Glate and Andreas Fischer as their leaders. These two accepted Saturday as the Bible Sabbath in 1527 and 1528. As his personal observation of the Sabbath in the Bible, Fisher said the following, quote, "The scriptures speak so often about the Sabbath, if one would have as many texts and passages about Sunday as there are about Sabbath, I would keep Sunday instead of Sabbath," which is true. The scriptures do not speak about Sunday. Sunday is a pagan day of worship and rest, really. Rest is the issue. It's not about worship. You can worship God on any day of the week. God created the sun. But nonetheless, you can worship Him on every day of the week. But resting will be the thing that will be enforced. And you'll see how it's all going to tie together. Seventh-day Baptists in England in the 1600s. There were Baptists who believed in the Sabbath in the 17th century. A prominent figure in this group is Stephen Mumford of the Bell Lane Seventh-day Baptist Church in London. He's the one who formed the first Seventh-day Baptist congregation in America. The Puritans of England in the 16th and 17th centuries. The Puritans were a group that took Sabbath observance seriously in England in the late 1500s into the 1600s. They differed from the Anglicans, who were the established Reformed Church of England. They were different in their view of how the Sabbath should be observed. For most of the Reformed England, Sunday was the day of worship and rest, but it was kept differently, more of a day for recreation, just like the Romans had with their festivities and their festivals on the day of the sun. The majority of Puritans also kept Sunday, but wanted it to be observed as a sacred day, more like what the Bible describes for the Sabbath. You're going to learn about the Puritans who started America. There are some very interesting stories about them. They even wanted to have the laws to guard its observance and to punish those who didn't. Keep that in mind. America was a Puritan country. Oh yeah, it was. But there was a minority among Puritans that kept Saturday. While they advocated for its sacred observance, they also insisted that the seventh-day Sabbath of the Bible was never changed and should be kept on Saturday, not Sunday. These views got the Puritans into a lot of trouble with the Anglican Church and the government. In 1632, the Puritans were forced out of the Anglican Church. They first went to the Netherlands, but soon encountered the same problems as England. The two groups crossed the Atlantic and settled in Plymouth, New England, and America. And the first arrived in 1620, and the second group arrived in 1629. These early settlers were mostly Sunday keepers, and they were determined to have Sunday observance as law. We will look at this. This led to the suppression of the seventh-day Sabbath advocates, who ended up being labeled as heretics. Now, what do you do to a heretic? What do you do to a heretic? There will come a day when, what? What did Jesus say? When they will kill you, thinking that they are doing a service to God, because you got to kill heretics. Well, you don't, but if you're a religious fanatic, then that's what you think. The Seventh-day Baptists in America in 1664. In 1664, Stephen Mumford arrived in Newport, Rhode Island from England. He believed that the seventh-day Sabbath to be the true Sabbath of the Ten Commandments and should not be substituted with Sunday. Good job, Stephen. Named after the first martyr. When he couldn't find any of his faith, he joined a congregation of Sunday-keeping Baptists. They arrived earlier on the Mayflower with the Pilgrim Fathers. After sharing his Sabbath beliefs with the Baptists, Many accepted his teachings. This caused a major division in the Baptist congregation. Finally, there was a split, and after that, the first Seventh-day Baptist Church in America was established in 1671. The church grew, gaining members from conversions and Sabbath believers coming in from England. By 1784, they had congregations in Connecticut, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and New York, in addition to the one in Rhode Island. From then on, they spread west with the tide of the American migration toward the West Coast. But it was never easy for them due to the various legislations on Sunday observance, which we will cover. They were often subject to fines and imprisonment for their convictions. Are you noticing a pattern, folks? But even so, they remained faithful, because that's what the Bible tells you in the Revelation, the various seals that are happening. We're between the sixth and the seventh seal. The people that were waiting under the altar in John's vision, this is the type of people that it's referring to, that they were basically persecuted and thrown in imprisonment and eventually killed too for not bowing down to the pagan system. All the congregations met together annually in a meeting they called the General Conference. They officially adopted the name Seventh-day Baptist in 1818 and got organized into a denomination. Their main reason for organization was to unite to spread the Sabbath message. In 1821, they launched a magazine called the Sabbath Recorder and published a series of tracts on the Sabbath in 1824. Eventually, they organized the Seventh-day Baptist General Tract Society in 1835. All these missionary efforts led to the massive growth in their numbers, and some of those who were reached were the Adventists of the Advent and Millerite movements. So the Seventh-day Adventists had their influences in the Seventh-day Baptists, and eventually from that was the Pilgrims, who basically, some of them were Sabbath keepers, which is very important. And so, of course, they go into the church, the Seventh-day Adventist history, which, you know about Seventh-day Adventism, hopefully. But now, let's look at Liberty Magazine, Sunday Laws in America. The very first Sunday law was enacted in the colony of Virginia in 1610, and it read the following, quote, "Every man and woman shall repair in the morning to the divine service and sermons preached upon the Sabbath day." Now, of course, they mean Sunday. "And in the afternoon to the divine service and catechizing, upon pain for the first fault to those to lose their provision and the allowance for the whole week, following for the second to lose their said allowance and also be whipped, and for the third to suffer death." Did you get that? Let's explain it. Attend services both morning and afternoon, or face the early American version of 3 strikes you're out, in case the third strike is death. Strike 1, lose your food allowance for a week. Strike 2, lose your food allowance for a week and be whipped. Strike 3, kiss your life goodbye. This was the Puritans. And this was not some totalitarian country, some atheistic dictatorship such as China or North Korea or Cuba. No, nor was it some theocratic regime such as Iran. It was America. Oh yeah, America was a Christian nation, all right. A Christian nation that had elements of the beast. And even within 100 years, it turned into the false prophet with all the secret societies that came and infiltrated it. But nonetheless, America had some very ugly history if you're a Sabbath keeper. Other colonies besides Virginia had their own Sunday laws requiring attendance at services and forbidding everything from working to sports to recreation to swearing and tippling at the taverns. Punishments included fines of money and up to 200 pounds of tobacco, being locked in the public stocks, jail time, and again, in grievous cases, death. Captain Kemble of Boston, Massachusetts, was in 1656 locked in the public stocks for 2 hours for kissing his wife on the Sabbath, which for them, again, they refer that as Sunday as the Sabbath. It's not. After spending 3 years at sea, the charge, unseemly behavior. Now, you look, people read this and say, oh, that's never going to happen again. Look at those antiquated times. How could they think and do such things? Really? Well, so far we've looked at 1,600 years of history, and the pattern is the same. And you will see that pattern beginning to repeat. So pay attention. Even newly elected President George Washington was not exempt from punishment under Sabbath laws. As he traveled from Connecticut to a town in New York to attend worship service one Sunday, in 1789, Washington was detained by a tithing man for violating Connecticut's law forbidding unnecessary travel on Sunday. Washington was permitted to continue his journey only after he promised to go no farther than his destination town. Now, I want you to understand all of this history, because once we get to current events and we discuss how all of this is going to go down, and you understand the pattern of behavior, it doesn't take a leap of imagination to understand how they're going to enforce it. In a world where everything is connected through digital things like your phone and GPS, and your cars are all digitized, the Internet of Things, they can enforce with AI how much work, or you're traveling too much on Sunday, you're going to get a fine. After a while, your social credit score is going to go down. Your profile in our new little Christian nationalist system shows that you're a rebel. You tend to spend way too much things doing on Sunday, and you're not following along. So now we're going to fine you with prison time. Oh, you went to prison again and again for your beliefs? We might have to take care of you because you're not following along. Do you see how this works? It doesn't take a stretch of the imagination, folks. It really doesn't, if you understand your history. So that's America for you. There's a lot more on that particular article, but just a highlight. Now, this is the National Sunday Law from 1888 that was basically fought over, and of course they lost, thankfully, but this is arguments of Alonzo T. Jones before the U.S. Senate Committee on December 13th, 1888. So this was a blue law, or a National Sunday Law, that they tried to pass, and Alonzo T. Jones was a figure in Seventh-day Adventism that was fighting this. I think he was a lawyer, but anyway. Quote, "A bill to secure to the people the enjoyment of the first day of the week, commonly known as the Lord's Day, as a day of rest, and to promote its observance as a day of religious worship." Now, isn't it interesting that this sounds very much like the language of Constantine? So interesting. "Be it enacted by the Senate and House of Representatives of the United States of America and Congress assembled, that no person or corporation or the agent, servant, or employee of any person or corporation shall perform or authorize to be performed any secular work, labor, or business to the disturbance of others, works of necessity, mercy, and humanity excepted. Nor shall any person engage in any play, game, or amusement or recreation to the disturbance of others on the first day of the week, commonly known as Lord's Day, or during any part thereof, in any territory, district, vessel, or place subject to the exclusive jurisdiction of the United States. Nor shall it be lawful for any person or corporation to receive pay for labor or service performed or rendered in violation of this section." This was a bill attempted in the late 1800s. And Alonzo T. Jones is a man who fought against it. This is Alonzo T. Jones, and you can basically learn a little bit about him. In 1889, with J.O. Corliss, he spoke against a bill in the U.S. Congress on Sunday observance. The bill was defeated. Therefore, he was a prominent speaker for the religious freedom, serving as editor of the forerunner of the Liberty magazine, which we just read from. It's a very useful little magazine. Now, this is also Liberty Magazine, and this is online. You can go to libertymagazine.org. They have a lot of great little articles, but this is titled New Look, Blue Laws. Let's see. Time-honored tradition. The reasoning of the late 1800s and early 1900s, when Sunday laws made headlines, went something like this. If a train goes through the town on a Sunday, then there must be people to unload it and care for its passengers. There is increased demand for restaurants, hotels, and taxis. Livestock needs to be moved from place to place, and all manner of other support services provided. But if there is no train for one day a week, the level of service can be reduced. Unnecessary labor can be avoided, not just for reasons of religious obligation, but because people naturally enjoy a time of rest. Very important arguments, because these are being used today. For centuries, America has had a patchwork of Sunday rest laws, and today these laws continue to pop up in surprising places. Many states and localities forbid the sale of alcohol on Sundays. You can't buy a car from a dealership on a Sunday in Nevada, Utah, North Dakota, Michigan, Rhode Island, and Maryland. In Texas, car dealerships must choose whether they want to shut down on Saturday or Sunday. Sales all weekend long are forbidden. Massachusetts perhaps has the most extended list of restrictions in the United States on Sunday business. Generally, if your business is non-retail, it cannot operate on Sundays unless you obtain an exemption. Manufacturers are also shut down on Sundays unless they require continuous operations for technical reasons. There's also bank laws on Sundays. So these things look, there's a history for this, and there's a precedent. It's not yet fully activated, but it's there. It's working, you'll see, with current headlines. Whenever a jurisdiction legislates a day of rest, there must also be exceptions in order to accommodate necessary food service, medical care, and other services. An exhaustive list of do's and don'ts thus becomes essential for the law to be enforced consistently. Also, a very important point. There will always be do's and don'ts, and they will probably increasingly alter those do's and don'ts. Initially, it's not going to be very restrictive because they want to get everybody to play along, but they're going to increasingly turn up the heat. In 1961, the Supreme Court considered blue laws in McGowan versus Maryland, a case brought by employees of a discount department store in Maryland who were fined for selling specific products, such as floor wax and loose-leaf notebooks, which were prohibited from sale on Sunday. This happened in the 60s. Maryland's detailed law allowed only certain items, such as medications, tobacco, newspapers, and food, to be sold on Sundays. The employees claimed that this law violated their rights under the Free Exercise Clause. But the McGowan court found that the employees had only alleged economic injury. Their religious practices had not been infringed by the prohibition against selling certain goods on Sundays. The court said that even though the blue laws historically aimed to promote church attendance, their purpose was now secular. That's how they're going to get you. To improve health, safety, recreation, and general well-being. That Maryland made the traditional day of worship Sunday, the day of rest, did not mean that the state could not use that law to meet our secular goals. Church and state. It's an illusion. That's what I forget which Supreme Court justice said that, but anyway, it's not what you think it is. The court said that the law did not constitute an establishment of religion. Justice Earl Warren wrote on behalf of the majority, quote, "The state seeks to set one day apart from all others as the day of rest, repose, recreation, and tranquility, a day which all members of the family and community have the opportunity to spend and enjoy together, a day on which there exists relative quiet and disassociation from the everyday intensity of the commercial activities, a day on which people may visit friends and relatives who are not available during working days, i.e. Sunday." Since McGowan, the Supreme Court has not again addressed the issue of blue laws, and so it remains the law. Government-enforced days of Sunday rest are not unconstitutional so long as a religious practice is not compelled or forbidden. And that's how they're going to get you. At first, it's going to be just for, the good of the climate, just for the good of the people, just to have a day of rest, just to make things a little easier. And then as the spiritual part catches up, then it'll make sense to say, you know what, you have to do more on this day. Otherwise, we're going to fine you because the people will go along with it. The breadth of the government authority in compelling business to close and the willingness of most Americans to comply was amply demonstrated during the extended COVID-19 shutdowns. Absolutely. That was a dry run, which encompassed all days of the week, including the weekends. An eco-Sabbath. It's easy to think of blue laws as a nostalgic relic from simpler times, yet support for government-enforced days of rest is never too deeply below the surface. In one contemporary guise, blue laws are being promoted not from a puritanical religious motive, but to keep the community from sin of Sabbath breaking, but rather from an environmental angle as a way to help remedy a crisis of our age. The Green Sabbath Project is supported by various religious and environmental organizations and encourages people to take a voluntary weekly day of rest. Quote, "Is there nothing you can do about the environment?" asked the organization's website. Nothing may be one of the best things you can do. One day every week, do nothing. The group gives the example of the city of Bogota, Colombia, which has implemented a car-free Sunday, meaning no more cars on Sunday, otherwise you get fined, in the name of climate change. In 2009, Satish Kumar wrote in The Guardian that using Sunday as a day of rest and renewal would be good for our personal health as well as the health of the planet. Rather than releasing carbon dioxide emissions by shopping, flying, and driving, Kumar said we can and should restore Sunday to a day for Gaia, the day of the earth, which, by the way, Laudato Si by the Pope opens with this exact same thing. Mother Earth, Gaia worship, pagan stuff. Even Pope Francis was impressed by the changes to the atmosphere during the COVID-19 shutdowns. Of course he was, because he wants to bring everything under the beast. Writing in his September 1st, 2020 World Day of Prayer for the Care of the Creation proclamation, quote, "In his wisdom, God set aside the Sabbath so that the land and its inhabitants could rest and be renewed." These days, however, our way of life is pushing the planet beyond its limits. Our constant demand for growth and the endless cycle of production and consumption are exhausting the natural world. Forests are leached, topsoil erodes, fields fail, deserts advance, seas acidify, and storms intensify. Creation is groaning. Already we can see how the earth can recover if we allow it to rest. The air becomes cleaner, the waters clearer, and the animals have returned to many places from which they have previously disappeared. Now, all this stuff, there's, again, the danger of this is that it's half true. Yeah, we have not been good stewards of the system that we've been given, the world. We have not been good stewards at all. But God cursed the world to decay until he returns, and we are at the very end. Climate change is not something that's happening because of human effort. The world and the things that are happening is because we are nearing the end. But the illusion is, if it's your responsibility that if it's your fault that these things are happening, let's put it this way. If it's your fault that these things are happening, then you must do something for them to be fixed. Do you get the point? And the solution is, well, rest on Sunday the way I tell you to, and obey my laws. That's the whole point. And if you believe in the lie from the forbidden fruit from the Garden of Eden, that it's up to you to make the choice, rather than God has predetermined reality for his glory, to reveal himself in many ways as a judge, as a savior, as a provider, as a merciful father, as the sovereign over all things reveal God's glory. And we are participating in that reality. We don't know the future. We're participating in it. We make choices. But nonetheless, we have the assurance that everything happens according to God's will. But the illusion that the Pope is peddling is the lie from the Garden of Eden, that no, we have to do something. That's what Catholicism is based on. Running the sacrament wheel. You have to do something. You got to make your salvation happen. It's up to you. But if it's up to you, you have departed from grace. If you believe that it's you who is doing all these things to the environment, and humanity must unite in one world system and rest together on Sunday for the environment, that is walking right into what the Bible warns you about. Moving on. Legacy of compulsion. The issue of Sabbath legislation was a focus of the first issue of Liberty, published in 1906. At that time, Reverend Bascom Robbins, not Baskin Robbins, but Bascom Robbins, that's interesting, was quoted as saying, quote, "In the Christian Decalogue, the first day was made the Sabbath by divine appointment." Now, this is some random Christian minister, but he's obviously wrong. But there is a class of people who will not keep the Christian Sabbath unless they are forced to do so. But that can easily be done. If we would say we will not sell anything to them, we will not buy anything from them, we will not work for them or hire them to work for us, the thing could be wiped out, and all the world would keep the Christian Sabbath. Do you realize this is a reverend saying this as early as the 1900s? I should say as recently as the 1900s. This is a reverend preaching to a congregation and writing an article saying, oh, you know those Sabbath-keeping Christians? Yeah, just ostracize them. Make them starve. That's how they're going to obey the rules. So misguided. But you have to understand that this is going to be repeating itself. The words of this reverend will be reverberating very soon. So you need to mentally prepare yourself. And you need to learn the truth to get into a practice of keeping the Sabbath so that you are not deceived, and you can stand up for the truth, and you can defend your beliefs, and you can teach others. Today, renewed enthusiasm for a unified day of rest tends to be less about God's sake and more for the sake of the planet. Yet calls for mandated synchronized rest, whether for reasons of economics, ecology, or even religion, still carry with them the taint and danger of blue laws and their legacy of compulsion. Oh yeah, the legacy of compulsion. The snake is frothing at the mouth to be worshipped. He can't wait. But God has allowed him to do it, and he will be, and he'll do so through this counterfeit day of rest, because again, the Sabbath identifies God as the lawgiver, as the provider, as the creator. So if Satan has his own counterfeit day attached to a counterfeit new world order that you have to be part of, now Satan can be acknowledged as the creator of that world, the provider, of course, because you're going to get material benefits by following the mark, and the savior from the persecution of the poor Sabbath-keeping Christians who didn't want to play along. Do you get the point? The Sabbath is the issue of our time, folks. People need to wake up. This is from a place called themarkofthebeast.net, And they have some good things, but you'll see also that they have some error as well. I wonder if I can zoom out. Sorry for the small text. Let's see. In respecting religious, these are quotes now, Roman Catholic quotes that you need to understand. In respecting religious liberty and the common good of all, remember, Jesuit terms, Fennec Fox, Christians should seek recognition of Sundays at the church's holy days as legal holidays. This is from the Catechism of the Catholic Church. Recovering the theological significance of Sunday is fundamental to rebalancing our lives. We strongly urge both clergy and laity to work cooperatively within their communities to stress the importance of Sunday for worship and family. The rediscovery of this day is a grace which we must implore. The North American Orthodox Catholic Theological Consultation. So this is an ecumenical movement, and they're pushing people, wherever you are in society, to push for this outcome. Therefore, also in the particular circumstances of our own time, Christians will naturally strive to ensure the civil legislation respects their duty to keep Sunday holy. This is John Paul II, who was all about Sunday. And he also said that if you do not keep Sunday, you should be punished as a heretic. So look up that. I forget which, I think it was in Dies Domini, but in one of his homilies or decretals or whatever, he talked about Sunday and those who do not observe Sunday, that they're heretics. Now, of course, what does it mean if you're a heretic? See how that works? It is necessary to hold Sunday in special high regard in order to remain united to Christ, as it is the day dedicated to the Lord. Message of Pope Benedict. So again, what happened 2,000 years ago, or 1,700 years ago? Remember the first decree by Theodosius in 360 whatever? If you are caught Judaizing, you will be shut out from Christ. What happens if you're shut out from Christ? Well, you're a heretic. You don't get any benefits from society. That's the minimum. The maximum is whoosh, off with your head. What's Pope Benedict saying 2,000 years later? It is necessary to hold Sunday in special high regard in order to remain united to Christ. Of course, they mean united to this system, which you will have to make a choice at some point. Without the Lord's Day, we cannot live. That meeting with the Lord only occurs in the specific day of Sunday. That life does not flourish without Sunday. That Sunday is the day of rest, of freedom and equality for all the world. This is Pope Benedict again. This organization proposes in every possible way to aid in the preserving Sunday as a civil institution. Our national security requires the active support of all good citizens in the maintenance of our American Sabbath. Sunday laws must be enforced. Quoted as principles contained in the Constitution of the original organization, then called the American Sabbath Union, cited in the Lord's Day Alliance, 25th Report, 1913. We're going to look at the Lord's Day Alliance. But the Lord's Day Alliance is what? Oh, we have an American Sabbath. We have to enshrine this right. It's a right. On September 7th, 1947, Pope Pius XII declared the time for reflection and planning is past in religious and moral fields, and the time for action has arrived. He said that the battle in religious and moral fields hinged on 5 points: religious culture, the sanctifying of Sunday, the saving of the Christian family, social justice, and loyalty and truthfulness in dealings. Do you see the agenda of the beast? It's telling you exactly what's on its mind. Now again, if the Bible identifies to you that the Roman Catholic system is the beast itself has bragged that the mark of its authority is Sunday, changing God's law to Sunday. And when basically we're people paying homage to the beast, when you do that, that's the mark of my authority that I can do that. And the Bible says that the dragon gave the beast his authority. Of course, God has allowed that to happen, to test the elect. And Pope Pius XII tells you in his 1947 address that the agenda is, one of the 5 points of the agenda is making sure we keep this Sunday thing going. Are you tying the pieces together yet? Because this is so important. It's going to repeat, folks. It's going to repeat. The RCC makes its contribution in the ethical and moral sphere according to the dispositions of international law, helps to define that law and makes appeal to it, that we live in a time when little groups of independent people threaten the unity of the world. Who do you think those little groups of independent people are? That the only way to combat this problem is by establishing the law and then ordering all of society according to this law, thus promoting peace and goodwill throughout the earth. This is cited from Apostolic Journey to the United States of America by Pope Benedict, so recently in 2008. Those little groups of people who oppose the law, who do you think those people are, folks? It's you and me who are protesting truly the beast. And right now it's not really an issue because society is shifting from dark to light. But when everybody starts to froth at the mouth for this Christian nationalist system, then those little groups of people will be outed and routed just like they were in centuries and centuries of human history. People cannot be sanctified except on Sunday. That Christ transferred Sabbath sacredness to Sunday, that only those who keep Sunday belong to Christ, that only on Sunday does the risen Lord make himself present among his followers, that only those worship God properly. Do you remember the whole thing with Jesus and the Sabbath and the Pharisees accusing him that he was breaking the Sabbath? He wasn't worshiping God properly, according to them. That may Sunday regain all of its importance. Again, Pope Benedict. Saturday is no longer the worship day of God. Only on Sunday can we become part of the body of Christ in the world. Only by worshiping on Sunday can we avoid egoistic isolation and instead be united in a great community. Don't be an egotistical, people that are just running away from this thing. Don't be so selfish. Join the community and bow down to the beast. A universal community becoming related to everyone in the world. Again, Pope Benedict. So these people are really, really fanatical about Sunday because Sunday is the mark of the devil's authority. Of course, again, the devil doesn't have any authority that God didn't give him to do. The devil is on God's leash. He's doing whatever God allows him to do. He doesn't do anything willy-nilly. So this is designed to test and separate the elect. And as time goes on, people who are going to be saved will come to the truth. So I hope that you're one of them. I hope you entertain my words. I hope you don't see this as foolishness because it really isn't. Now, Wikipedia, Lord's Day Alliance. The Lord's Day Alliance, formerly known as the American Sabbath Union, is an ecumenical Christian first-day Sabbatarian organization. Based in the United States and Canada, the organization was founded in 1888. Do you remember that year? Remember that very important year with Alonzo T. Jones? By mainstream Christian denominations. These churches worked together to found the Lord's Day Alliance in order to effect change in the public sphere, especially with respect to lobbying for the passage of Sunday rest laws. Now, you remember how serious they were with their quote we just read about doing this. The Lord's Day Alliance publishes a biannual magazine called E-Sunday Magazine. Erwin Fallbush and George William Bromley write that throughout its existence, the Lord's Day Alliance, supported by labor unions, has lobbied to prevent secular and commercial interests from hampering freedom of worship and from exploiting workers. Dark to light. Secularism, king of the South, versus Christian nationalism, king of the North. Counterfeit worship, counterfeit religion. It's always the enemy. Secularism is the big bad boogeyman that overworks you so that the counterfeit can come in and rescue you. For example, in the United States, Congress was supported by the Lord's Day Alliance in securing a day of rest for city postal clerks whose hours of labor, unlike those of city mail carriers, were largely unregulated. So there we go. We gave them a Sunday rest to help them take it easy when God already gave you a day of rest if you just simply follow the Bible. The Canadian branch of the Lord's Day Alliance, now known as the People for Sunday Association of Canada, was successful in passing the Lord's Day Act in 1906, which remained in force until 1985. 80 years was this thing in force. And of course, Canada became liberal, but now it's becoming conservative again, as I've covered in this week's particular episode on the Two Kings. Two Kings, One Table, check it out. Mission. The Lord's Day Alliance continues to, quote, encourage all people to recognize and observe a day of Sabbath rest and to worship the risen Lord Jesus Christ. But wait a minute, that sounds good so far. On the Lord's Day, Sunday. Oops. Ding, ding, ding. Fennec Fox alert. Organization. The board managers of the Lord's Day Alliance is composed of clergy and laity from Christian churches, including Baptists, Catholics, Episcopalian, Friends, Lutheran, Methodist, non-denominational, Orthodox, Presbyterian, and Reformed traditions. Are you seeing this? Do you understand what's going on? Do you understand the art of war? The Jesuit operatives that are pretending to be Protestants and other religions? The fact that the Jesuits seduce people or either threaten them to go along? It's always been like this, folks. to give you the illusion that the world is coming together. And yeah, the Catholic thing is a good idea. We should do like the Catholic thing says. Because look, the Baptists are agreeing with it. The Reformation, if you saw the last episode 7 in this series, the Reformation, when they had the Council of Trent, they lost because of this issue, because they caved to Sunday worship. If you're a Protestant, meaning if you're going to protest the Catholic system, then you better observe the Sabbath on Saturday, because Saturday is the seventh day. But they insisted on keeping Sunday, which is a tradition of the Catholic Church, and they lost because of that. They were condemned because of that. So the Protestants, although the Protestant Reformation had a lot of good things that it exposed, it failed, because the beast ultimately won by proving them with their own word, which is, again, the Bible has nothing to say about Sunday. So remember, the devil knows Scripture as better than anybody, really. When he tempted Christ in the desert, he tempted him with Scripture. The devil knows the Word of God, and he's going to use it against you if you are not certain in it. So if you are a quote-unquote Protestant, or you protest the Catholic system, then you have to be a consistent Protestant and abandon this Sunday worship thing. Now, of course, again, you can worship God on Sunday, but what I mean is like worshiping through paying rest and homage and, all the stuff that we're talking about today on Sunday. That is a pagan thing. Worshiping God is not pagan on any day of the week. This is Laudato Si, and of course, I've talked about it, and I want to just mention to you this. Watch this beginning. Laudato Si, mi Signore, praise be to you, my Lord. In the words of this beautiful canticle, St. Francis of Assisi reminds us that our common home is like a sister with whom we share our life, and a beautiful mother who opens her arms to embrace us. Praise be to you, my Lord, through our sister, Mother Earth, who sustains and governs us, and who produces various fruit and colorful flowers and herbs. This is straight out of Tammuz and Semiramis and Nimrod sun worship. This is paganism in the very opening lines of this document that governs all of the papal climate change Sunday, Green Sunday, Jesuit agenda. But of course, what I wanted to show you is that they have a thing on Sunday towards the end. And of course, this is tied to the agenda. Item 237 in Laudato Si. I'm not going to read it all, but basically, again, it's the same stuff that all the popes said. On Sunday, our participation in the Eucharist is special importance. Sunday, like the Jewish Sabbath, is meant to be a day which heals our relationship with God, ourselves with others, yada, yada. They give you all these reasons. You have to rest on Sunday, you see. So, of course, this is going to be tied to what? To climate change. Resting on Sunday for the environment is going to be wrapped up into this particular agenda. So, what do we take from this? Well, I hope that you've realized that Sunday laws have been enacted throughout history. Throughout the last 2,000 years, Christians have been forced and persecuted to obey the Antichrist power, to rest on Sunday, to keep Sunday, the day of the sun, sacred. Sunday is a pagan holiday. You have to watch the previous episode to understand that and why that is so connected to paganism. Christians kept the Sabbath after Christ. So all the people telling me that Christians never kept the Sabbath, you are wrong, decidedly wrong, because Christians throughout the last 2,000 years have kept the Sabbath, because the seventh-day Sabbath is the true Sabbath. But we know that the devil created his counterfeit day, and he did that because Christians were basically weakened by persecution during the initial stages of the church, so they were starting to compromise because they were afraid. And various things happened. And then after that, pagan converts started to come into Christianity. Then Constantine fused paganism with Christianity in 321. So these things happened very strategically to create a counterfeit religion and a counterfeit day that Satan could obtain worship through. Remember, the Sabbath uniquely identifies God as the lawgiver. Anybody could tell you not to kill, not to steal, because we have a conscience. The reason you know the law is from God is because part of the law is the Sabbath. It is the mark of God. Because it identifies that the person who's giving you the law is also the person who created the earth, the one who redeemed you from Egypt, in this case, spiritual Egypt in our case, and the one who provides for you manna, i.e. provides for you on the day of rest and will always provide for you. That is the identifier of the lawgiver, is the Sabbath. And if you want to be God, you want to be the Most High, right? That's what the devil wants. Then the perfect way to obtain worship as the provider, as the creator, as the savior, is through a counterfeit day where you're giving the morality back to humanity of what is good and what you should do and what you shouldn't do. And that is anchored in your own counterfeit day of Sunday worship. And of course, that Sunday worship will also be anchored in a new counterfeit creation, which is this millennial reign that everybody thinks is coming. You're walking straight into the Antichrist paradise, bro. You need to realize that this premillennialism and a future 1,000-year golden age on earth, this is not the truth. We are in the millennium right now. When Jesus returns, the millennium is over because he judges everybody and the devil, and he resurrects people, and he inaugurates eternity. But nonetheless, the point is that's what the devil is doing. He is creating a way for him to be worshipped as God through this counterfeit day. And he will enforce that day just like he has throughout the last 2,000 years. People don't realize that out of the last 2,000 years of history, over 1,400 of those years, we saw a Christian nationalist society. Do you realize that? The majority of history has been Christian nationalist, persecuting Christians for not obeying and bowing down. Do you understand the gravity of that? Hopefully you do. Hopefully you also understand that America has a fierce history of fundamentalism with Sunday persecution. The Puritans were Christian, but a lot of them were also very deceived. And some of them were basically agents of the beast and basically threatening people with, getting killed or lashed if you didn't go to church in the morning and in the evening, according to the Sunday law. And of course, we saw the history of Sunday laws in the Americas quite a bit as well, because America is where this new thing is going to start. And I talk about that in my Trump episode. I talk about that in the recent episode on 2 Kings, 1 Table. I've talked about it dark to light. I've talked about it pretty much everywhere, that this is where the false system is going to start. We've had so many things like Christianization of culture. Now Jesuit Hollywood is, everybody's flipping to the right, flipping to conservative values, to Christian values. You have PureFlix, Angel Studios, all these new medias are starting to populate the world with all kinds of things like The Chosen, the Hallow app, mega churches, the prosperity gospel. All this stuff is coming from the United States. These are false signs and wonders that are fusing reality into this new thing. So you have to understand that this is going to happen here first, and there's certainly a precedent for it. Everything is being set up politically for this new system to roll out and to enforce a mandate worldwide. Now, there are many things that need to happen, but they will happen quickly. And we'll look at that in the next part, which is going to be recent events. But nonetheless, you have to realize that history repeats itself, folks. It really, truly does. And it will repeat itself very shortly. You have to see the patterns because they're like reverberations of sound. What comes will come again. And all the patterns that you see are going to be enforced with a new level of technology and control that the world has never seen. So history is repeating. Be ready for it. Develop a practice of keeping the Sabbath. Understand the truth behind the Sabbath so that you can teach others, you can help others, you can help them get out of this system and get mentally and emotionally and physically prepared for what is to come, because there will come a time when what you have heard me read to you about will be repeated. And we'll see what happens, but we know that that is the marker of the very final moments, which is the good news. Do you understand? Jesus said that the days were shortened so that some people would be left alive. Otherwise, nobody would be left alive. That means that when you see all of these things happening, people starting getting hunted down or getting imprisoned for, not going to church, or who knows how they're going to enforce it. We'll talk about that. But when you see these things, rejoice. Rejoice, because that means he's very, very close. Not long now, because some people have to be left alive. So that's the good news. This is part 2. Now we're going to go to part 3, current events. Okay, so now we're getting into the meat and potatoes of this, and I hope that you're still here. I hope that you're paying attention, because now that you have the historical context and understanding the patterns of the snake throughout time, it's time to look at current events. So we're going to start with actually this website called markofthebeast.net. Again, they have some good stuff. They haven't updated, it seems, as of last year, 2023, but this is a list of articles. We're just going to read the headlines, just so you understand. These are articles from the last 10 years, like I think I stopped at like 2011. We're going to go up to 2023, and then we're going to continue from 2023 up until 2024. Now, here's another thing that I highlighted on purpose, because this is the problem. Notice what they say here. I'll actually zoom in just so you can see it. Are you worshiping the true living God of the Bible? Well, so far it seems like you care about, the truth, because you're all about the Sabbath. Then what do they say? The God of our church pioneers, please see the truth about the Trinity doctrine. Of course, they deny the Trinity, and what happens if you do? Well, you deny the divinity of Christ if that's the case. And this is a real problem, folks. The Trinity is a core doctrine of Christianity. It is a revelation of God. The Bible forces you into a Trinity. And people who deny it are unwittingly cutting their own feet off, because ultimately, if you deny the divinity of Christ, then that could be a salvation issue. Now, I don't know people's heart, but it's hard to imagine that you believe that Christ is the perfect payment for your sins when Christ is not God to you, because God has infinite value. The whole purpose of Christ being both God and man is that his sacrifice has infinite value in order to pay for your eternity. Do you get the point? Not just to pay for your sins, but for you to live forever. There needs to be infinite value in that sacrifice, meaning Christ had to be both God and man. But if you deny the core teaching that Christ is not equal with the Father, or you come up with some clever thing about, he's kind of divine, but he's not, the Father is really the source of, like how the Eastern Orthodox do. I talk all about this stuff in my Trinity series, so I'm not going to digress on this, but the point is, everybody gives you truth, and then there's something that they give you that's a lie. So you have to be very careful, and you have to have huge Fennec fox ears. That's why those foxes are such great little reminders, because they truly do visualize exactly how you should be spiritually, with giant, giant ears that listen. Okay, so let's scroll down here, and this is from 2016. I think it's just from 2016. But there's a lot here. I want you to see that they have an entire record here of, if you actually go all the way to the bottom, you can see all these are articles that they've indexed over the course of, decades. This is now, they have a Sunday Laws News archive for 2010 through 2013. So this goes back years and years and years and years. We're telling constant articles on pushing Sunday, pushing Sunday, pushing Sunday. And you're going to see how these things are intensifying. But let's start with 2016. Right around the time that Trump got elected. British MPs pushing to scrap Sunday laws, but shop workers' union members oppose it. Churches in Switzerland are calling for Sunday rest. Every second Sunday to be mandatory day off for TV industry in India. The Lord's Day Alliance sponsors a conference on Sabbath, Sunday, and renewal. This is in 2016. The Lord's Day Alliance is still very active. Remember, it's an ecumenical thing. It's part Catholic, part Baptist, part whatever kind of Christian you are. It doesn't matter. We're all Jesuits anyway. Tongan bakeries banned from opening on Sundays. Over 500,000 Polish signatures in support of the civic draft law on limitation of trade on Sundays. EU bishops back pillar of social rights, call for recognition of Sunday rest. Croatia, Catholic Church wants to ban working on Sundays. Chairman of the German Trade Union Confederation pushing for Sunday rest. 2 years after Pope Francis launched Laudato Si, the Vatican's plea to, quote, save the earth, people of all faiths are unified globally to beat climate change, which of course the climate change gospel is central to them implementing the mark of the beast. That's why they're doing it. Catholic bishops and trade unions pushing for complete ban on Sunday trading in Poland. Lawmakers in Poland approve a gradual ban on Sunday shopping after push by Catholic Church and trade unions. Now, Poland has been in the news quite a bit, especially in these particular headlines. If you remember, I've mentioned this several times, but when Pope John Paul went to communist Poland and they received him with such joy. They received the Antichrist with amazing joy. And they said, we want God. What does that show you? That shows you what I've said over and over again, what other people have said, not too many, but a few. Communism is the dark that leads people into the light or false light salvation of the Catholic Church, of Christian nationalism. Do you understand? Look at Poland now. They went from communism, being oppressed by the big bad cop, to now everybody's got to go back to Sunday legislation, upholding the beast's mark of authority. New Jersey mayor says protecting Sunday blue laws will always be his number one priority, 2018. European Sunday Alliance, which we will look at, very interesting developments there. Do you remember the date that Constantine set his little Sunday law on, the first 321 AD? March 7th, keep that in mind. European Sunday Alliance calls on all its supporters to take action against Sunday work, March 2018. Taking Sunday seriously. Poland leads the way in providing an example to America. Of course, America will be the one to implement it for the rest of the world, but they're practicing in different places at different times. How Europeans are fighting back against Sunday trading. Why Sunday is the most important day of the week for your well-being. New Italian government plans to put ban on Sunday shopping. Now, if you remember, Italy is now conservative, and they set the stage for other countries too in Europe to be flipping. I talked about that in my Dark to Light episode with the two kings. Protestant churches in Netherlands, protest about rainbow flag and Sunday shopping. So there you go. The woke left and their rainbow flag. Of course, the rainbow is God's sign that he won't destroy the earth, but with a flood, I should say. But the woke left is tied to Sunday shopping. Do you understand? Do you understand what this article is revealing to you about the future? The people who are getting thrown under the bus right now, the obvious evil, the big bad atheistic left that refuses to comply, as a Bible-believing Christian, when the time comes, you will be associated to those people, just like 1700 years ago they said, don't Judaize. Don't be like those people that aren't obeying us. Be like us. They're going to associate you to all the people that they put under the bus in the past. Of course, they're going to come with the obvious evil first, but then eventually they're going to whittle it down to the Bible-believing Christians. Mark my words, it's going to happen because it's not my words, it's really the Bible's words telling you it's going to happen. The beast will be worshipped. People will marvel after the beast, and those who do not comply will be persecuted. Author, economist, and religious scholar David Smadja calls for International Weekly Day of Rest to combat climate change. We're still in 2018. Now we're in 2019. New York Times columnist says maybe it's time to declare a national Sabbath. Italy's populists want to close stores on Sundays. Sunday is one step closer to becoming a holiday by law in Antigua and Barbuda. Sunday should be made a rest day with families, says Malaysian minister. All over you look, whether they're Muslim or whatever else, it's all coming to a head. This is now 2020. Jewish scholar calls for a weekly day of rest to combat climate change. So even the Jews are on the whole Laudato Si agenda. Premier of Quebec closing business on Sundays in April, particularly grocery stores, to give employees a chance to rest. There you go. Mayor Cam Guthrie, after COVID-19, I suggest everything be closed on Sundays to rest. Dark to light. Fox News, which, by the way, should be called Catholic News, but anyway, asked on their Facebook page if all stores should close on Sundays. This is April 2020. They had a little poll. Catholic Church asking, bring back the blue laws. Samoa PM wants to ban Sunday trading. Philippines, reimpose the blue Sunday law. This is 2021 now. Trinidad and Tobago, let's keep Sunday sacred. Dispute flares up as Turkish tradespeople want malls closed on Sundays. The world needs climate Sundays and wild Christians more than ever. U.S. economists, this is now 2023, this last one. U.S. economists blame repeal of Sunday blue laws for increase in death and despair, plus new mandatory rest day in Colombia. So death and despair if we don't have this Sunday thing. So all of this is now current up to last year as of the time of this recording. Now, let's see what we have. This is September 11th, 2023. Governments are implementing a Green Sunday as the solution to the climate crisis. This is a Green Sunday law. I've talked about it before, and we'll mention it a little bit more as time goes on. This is the quiet revolution of the Sabbath. This is now September 30th, 2023, about 2 weeks later. And of course, this is telling you about how, gosh, it's just so controversial to do the Sabbath, but maybe it's a good thing. Maybe we should rest. Maybe this secular way of living and this atheistic woke left way of doing things isn't been so good for us. We're just so stressed out. We need to rest. Well, when is the time to rest? Sunday seems to be the day that everybody rests. Of course, they don't read the Bible, and they know that Sunday is the counterfeit. This is from a website called Eternity. Sabbath as restoring or restoring. And again, this is all about, should we do the Sabbaths? Maybe Sabbath is a good thing. But of course, what they mean is Sunday Sabbath. And this is from December 22nd, 2023. All very current stuff. This is from Catholic News, i.e. Fox News. In a new year, pastor reveals how to get back to church every Sunday. A prayerful decision. This is January of 2024, right out the gate. Of course, the new year is in the spring, but anyway, the pagan new year, right out the pagan new year, what do they tell you? Hey, get back to church on Sunday, start obeying, start following that pattern because you will need to be obedient. You'll need to be obedient for the thing that's coming. This is from boldcafe.org. Sabbath for this year and beyond. January 4th, 2024. This is from Bold Cafe again. This is, again, same day, 5 steps for creating rest in a world of busyness by Dr. Crystal Hall. Let's read a little bit about what she writes. This article offers 5 steps with the accompanying biblical principles for creating rest in a world of busyness. As a coach for women in ministry, I've helped dozens of lay professionals, pastors, and deacons create Sabbath practices that stick with these steps. Well, good. That so far sounds good. You're helping people obey the Sabbath, but let's read a little more. Make sure that you're doing the right Sabbath. Your rest day may be something other than Sunday. Oops! All that talk and all the scripture citing from Exodus and all the pumping up of this stuff that she talks about is now revealed to you as what she's actually doing, which is advocating for the counterfeit. But the principle is that you intentionally set aside a specific time to rest. That's the principle. So you do whatever you want as long as you rest. Once you've decided on your work and rest hours, create a system for making decisions around your time. You do not decide when you rest. You do not decide when you rest. You obey what God has said when to rest, which is the 7th day, because the 7th day is tied to the Creator, the one who made the world in 6 days. The one who, by the way, also rested in the tomb so that you could be saved. After his Passion Week of the 6 days of the last 6 days of work towards this new covenant. So the Sabbath is specifically on the 7th day. You do not get to pick the day that you rest. Very, very important. And of course, if you look at this person, if we go back here to her website, she's a very influential person. She's a certified coach serving women in ministry and holds a PhD in biblical studies. She has a PhD in biblical studies and yet is an agent of the beast. Who knows if she's maybe a Jesuit operative, or maybe she's just deceived. Maybe she's been bribed or threatened, or maybe she's just growing up with this idea and she hasn't actually done much studying of the real Sabbath in her PhD. So who knows? But either way, goes to show you. Now, let's look at the next one. This is from saltandlight.sg, Sabbath for All Creation, January 4th. Sabbath has an image problem. For some, it conveys Victorian strictness, starched, uncomfortable clothes, improving books, and long church services. Others may remember last-ditch campaigns to keep Sunday special by preventing supermarkets opening. Today's Sabbath often conveys overwhelming negative ideas. Don't do that, especially if it's enjoyable. Now, I'm going to give you another context here that when they say Sabbath, they mean Sunday. This is a Christian site, but they mean Sunday. How far this is from God's plans for the Sabbath? It's meant to be a joyful celebration of the very goodness of all creation. I've recently been struck anew by the richness and relevance of the Sabbath for a hectic and hurried humanity. for our oppressed fellow creatures, and for the environment, for the exploited environment we all depend on. Yeah, it's good for everything, right? But it's not Sunday. After all, this is no marginal theme in the Bible. The Sabbath is, and they tell you it's instituted at creation, codified in the covenant, transformed in Christ, a foretaste of humanity, to give you all these, seemingly good things. Now, of course, when they say transformed in Christ, they mean the Sabbath has been changed to Sunday. It's been transformed, which is total nonsense. God does not change his moral character, does not change his laws, but this is a Catholic tradition, which is now being advocated to you by Protestants using the Bible as, proof. See, he resurrected on the first day, therefore he transformed the Sabbath. And of course, they cite to you Matthew 12:18, which is Jesus is Lord of the Sabbath. And they say it's not replacing it, but it's just reinterpreting it. Well, what does that mean? You actually are replacing it if you believe that it's going from the seventh day to the first day. You're replacing it with a new day. That is replacement. It's not reinterpretation. We do reinterpret it, and you will see that in the final episode of the series, which is next, after this week. We do reinterpret it, but not in the sense that we're not doing it anymore or we're doing it on a different day. We are reinterpreting it in light of the new revelation. That is the whole point. You are reinterpreting the Sabbath in light of the revelation of the Messiah. Because before that, the Sabbath was a symbol of God rescuing the Jews from the Egyptians, the Israelites. And of course, it also was tied to him being a creator and provider in the wilderness with the 7-day pattern of manna. All these things are designed to identify God. But as of Christ now, we have, as Christians, even more meaning attached to the Sabbath. So yes, we are reinterpreting it. As God freed the Jews from Egypt, he freed us from the slavery of sin and death and this pagan system, that we don't have to fear it anymore. As God provided for the Jews, for the Israelites in the wilderness with manna, he will provide for you even when they persecute you with this whole coming Sunday law. And of course, God created the world, and he created the new covenant through Jesus Christ by resting in the tomb on the seventh day. We have a profoundly new meaning of the Sabbath. We are reinterpreting it compared to Old Testament Jews and Israelites. True, but that doesn't mean moving the day to another day. Do you see the point? It's still the same day. It just has a vastly, profoundly new meaning. Not that it's new, but it's better. It's a new covenant. It's more meaningful. It's more fulfilled. It's made full, is the point. But of course, if you are a Protestant that is deceived, you are advocating what the beast has told you, like these people are, and bringing people along with you so that everybody can merge into this new thing. And this is the problem. This is the problem. Now, they say here later, it says, Sabbath is renewal. Jesus rose from death on Sunday, the first day of a new week, thereby initiating a new creation and renewing Sabbath as an anticipation of creation's ultimate destiny when all things will be made new. Now, of course, again, there's some truth to this. The new creation, the new beginning, the resurrection is our blessed hope. But the teaching that Jesus rose on the first day of the week, and therefore now that is the Christian Sabbath, that is a tradition of men who were mostly pagan converts, and it's a tradition really that's tied to paganism and the fusion of paganism with Christianity. Watch the previous episode, number 7, you will learn the truth. But here we are, Protestants, many centuries later, advocating the truth of the beast, which is not the truth, it's a lie. So this is something to be very attentive to. This one is from January 5th, 2024. Why you should attend church in person this Sunday. Why are you telling me what to do? Why you got to do this on Sunday? You should do it. Do it. It's good for you. This is a quote. It says, leverage the Lord's Day to anticipate the last day. Again, these are all Catholic teachings. This is not true biblical Christianity. The Sunday gathering is an outpost of heaven. You know, in Orthodoxy, I remember when I used to be Orthodox, we used to believe that the liturgy was like when heaven opens and there's angels in the liturgy and all this stuff. It's like, where is that in the Bible exactly? It's not. It's a tradition of men designed to glorify the day of the sun. Long view. If you've grown sluggish in your commitment to Christ's body, attend a gospel preaching church this Sunday and every Sunday thereafter. You'll be eternally grateful you did. Now, again, there's nothing wrong with worshiping God on Sunday, on Monday, on Tuesday, any day of the week you want to worship God and get together with other believers. In the book of Acts, they got together every day. Sunday was one of those days, and it had a memorial because, okay, yeah, Christ did resurrect on the first day. That's something that we keep, but they didn't stop working on Sunday. They still kept the Sabbath. Sunday had a special meaning because of Christ's resurrection, but it wasn't the Sabbath. And they got together every day. It was a very warm fellowship. Unlike today where we go to church for, an hour and then that's it. Say hello to everybody, then okay, back to our lives. They were together every single day. But the point is this, it's imprinting on you and pushing you. Right now they're pushing the cultural agenda. It's not forcing anybody. It's inviting them and saying, look, this is good for your health. You should really do it. Come on, everybody's doing it. Keep on doing it. Get in this pattern. Get in this thinking, because this thinking is going to be integral for the thing that's coming. You got to start thinking like this. You see the point? This is from AOL.com. Grace for the Day, the Dying American Rest Ethic. January 6th, 2024. These are coming one after the other. I wonder why. God created the world in 6 days, and on the seventh day he rested. It was the seventh day that he made holy. They tell you right away the truth. Let's see how they spin it. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth and the sea and all there is in them, and rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. Thank you. And many other places where it says it. Seventh day alone is blessed. This is a reversal of values of Americans. We value work, although we complain about it. And we see rest as a lost opportunity for work. We laud those who get to work early and leave late, rarely taking a day off or going on vacation. They're entrepreneurial go-getters and truly capitalists. Folks will protect their work even over their own mental health. That is why it is difficult to schedule therapy sessions for modern workers. They must not leave their jobs. The seventh day God called the Sabbath, the one he made holy. The holy day is the day his people rested. So far, so good, right? So far, so good. He was so protective of this day of the rest that he made its violation punishable by death. It's true. And now what is Satan going to do about his day? He's going to make his violation of his day punishable by death. Do you see the point? It's a counterfeit. Of course, they cite to you another Exodus verse. For 6 days work be done. On the seventh day there is a Sabbath of complete rest. Holy to the Lord, meaning set apart. Whoever does any work on the Sabbath day shall be put to death. It was not just a day of rest, but a day of complete rest. We work because God works, and we rest because God rested, or we should. So far, so good. I get it. The Sabbath was part of a Jewish ceremonial law. Fennec Fox, wrong. It was not part of the ceremonial law at all. It is part of the 10 moral commandments that are eternally part of God's character. The Sabbath is not a ceremonial system. There were Sabbaths that were holidays that were apart from the weekly Sabbath, but the weekly Sabbath itself is not part of the ceremonial system. But this is another deception. So the other Christians cite the salt and light. What was the deception? Well, the deception is, it's transformed. We have reinterpreted now to be a different day. That's deception number one. Deception number two is, it was a Jewish thing. We don't need to worry about it because it was done away with. So we should just rest anyway because, that was probably a good idea that people did that. When should we rest? Well, Sunday is a church tradition, so we should rest on Sunday. Do you see the point? While it was designated as a day of rest, it was intended to be a Shabbat to the Lord, a Sabbath to the Lord. Moses then said to them, This is what the Lord meant. Tomorrow is the Sabbath observance, holy Sabbath to the Lord. For 6 days, Jews were allowed to work to provide for themselves and for their families. The seventh day, the last day of the week, was to be devoted to God. It is fitting 6 days of work to take care of everyone you love, and then one day to thank God for the blessings that the 6 days brought to his people. It was their day of worship. Yes, true. So the problem is that it is still the day of worship. The problem in the sense that they're not acknowledging to you. It's still the day of worship. But the angle of this article is, well, you see, this was some old tradition they were doing. Maybe we should do that as Christians because, that really helps. We're just working too hard as Americans. Well, America has a tradition of Sunday laws. Maybe we should go back to that. That was written in January. Now, this is from, let's see, where is that written? What did I write here? January 2003, 2023. It's actually 2024. So this is also, again, recent. And we'll comment on this article, but this is from Jewish Communities of Vermont. Why reviving a 2,600-year-old spiritual practice made my life better. So it's about psychological benefits. Now, in this case, I believe this is a Jewish Sabbath issue, but nonetheless, the point is oh, this is a good thing for your health. It's good for your mental health. It's good for the environment. It's not because God said do this, or Jesus rested, so you should rest, and we have a fulfillment in the Sabbath as Christians. It's never that. They have to go with, well, it's this or that, or, whatever worldly benefits there are to get you to come along. Now, let's read a little bit about it. Pope Francis argued much the same about Christianity's Sunday in his 2015 Laudato Si. So this is from a Jewish person, and he's now finding parallels to the Christians and the Pope because, it's a good idea to rest a day out of the week. Not resting is just bad for the soul, he says, but it's also bad for the earth. The constant drive to produce and consume more is squandering natural resources, and it prevents us from treating the living world and one another with dignity and respect. The Sabbath forces us to consider how we spend all our days. Sunday, like the Jewish Sabbath, is meant to be a day which heals our relationship with God, with ourselves, with others in the world. This is that part I read from Laudato Si, section 237 or whatever. Francis writes, we tend to demean contemplative rest as something unproductive and unnecessary, but this is to do away with the very thing which is the most important about work, its meaning. There you go. The devil is telling you how to work, how to rest, so that you obey him and acknowledge him as the creator. The decline of a day of rest. Sunday restrictions were once common across the United States, which people seem to forget. Sometimes known as blue laws, because of the blue paper they were written on, by the way, just so you're curious. They prohibited things such as selling liquor, hunting, and opening shops. Intended in part to encourage Sunday church attendance, the U.S. Supreme Court declared in 1884 that these also served as a vital social mission to protect all persons from the physical and moral debasement which comes from uninterrupted labor, especially to the poor and dependent, to the laborers in our factories and workshops in the heated rooms of our cities. Now, do you see the point? Who is the enemy here? The enemy is socialism and making you work all day and just this secular King of the South system. And that's the enemy that's supposed to make the King of the North look good. The King of the North being Christian nationalism, going back to that whole system, the counterfeit. So that's the enemy working too hard, which was there. So we got to go back to rest. But you're not going to rest on God's day. You're going to rest on the day that you determine. And of course, that's what Cain did. He approached God the way he wanted to approach him. And of course, Cain was denied. The decision was reaffirmed by the court in decisions during the 1960s. Sunday is a day apart from all others, wrote Chief Justice Earl Warren in one. We looked at that. Over time, however, this rationale has fallen out of favor. Although some countries still mandate some businesses' stay closed on Sunday, and 28 U.S. states still restrict some alcohol sales on that day, many of these obsolete and nonsensical laws, as one American University legal scholar put it in 2022, have been repealed or struck down. That's right, the King of the South has been very active in taking down those things, but they're going to come back, don't worry. They're going to come back. The King of the South is not the one that's going to take over. That's not because of the decline of religiosity in America. The primary motivation has been economic, writes political scientist Sarah Ziegler. With increased competition and people on the move around the clock, many businesses cannot afford to lose a full day of revenue by remaining closed on Sunday. They'll figure out a way. A Green Sabbath. In 2019, Schorsch founded the Green Sabbath Project to incite a mass movement to observe a weekly day of rest. For the secular and religious alike, there you go. Everybody can come into this new thing. Whether you're from the King of the South or you're from the King of the North, doesn't matter. This new thing is going to be for everybody. This is not a spa day, but a modern version of what the ancients practiced, avoiding work in factories and offices or even in front of our laptops, opting out of driving or flying or using engines of any kind for that day, putting off shopping, preparing food in advance, and ceasing incessant doing. Don't live on that day. Acknowledge the devil, because that's what it's going to be about. The immediate effect among millions of people, he calculates, could dial back emissions for at least one day a week with no new technology or spending. There you go. Save the environment. But the practice of doing nothing, he argues, can make people change the way they live year-round by appealing to an ancient human ritual rather than reason or even religion. There you go. It's a ritual. Who gave you that ritual? There was no reason to pick apart the seventh day from the other six. God structured time that way because it directly identifies him as the creator. Prior to that, people were just working every day. Like, they had a day for the sun that they honored, but, it was very loosely structured. Remember, the Romans had an 8-day calendar. Some people had a 9-day calendar. I mean, it was all over the place. People's calendation was very strange because it wasn't based on anything. It was just based on pagan concepts. The 7th-day Sabbath and the 7-day week was started by God. Nor is a day of rest an all or nothing proposition. Many are taking incremental steps toward an ancient wisdom by observing a technology Shabbat, eschewing screens for 24 hours. Mexico City and Bogota, Colombia are handing over their streets to bicyclists and pedestrians every Sunday. In Bergen County, New Jersey, a zip code boasting more retail sales than any other in the United States, thanks to its 4 massive malls, residents have reaffirmed Sunday laws banning many retail sales on the grounds of a healthier community. Interesting stuff, isn't it? Now, let's see what the next one says. This is from Time magazine, which is very king of the South, very liberal, very woke, that side of the street. But Time is now talking about the Sabbath. Rest takes hard work. There are a few things. This is again from, I don't know, where is that? Let's see, January 25th. So we're still in January of 2024. There are a few things better for us than regular rest. Whether it's breaks during the day, hobbies that take our mind off work, weekly Sabbaths, or annual vacations, routines that layer periods of work and rest help us to be more productive, have more sustainable careers, and enjoy richer and more meaningful lives. That's right, all you liberal, pagan liberals who have forgotten to rest and you just work all day and you don't do anything for yourself to rest spiritually. Maybe this is a good idea, guys. Maybe the King of the North is right. Maybe all this stuff that people were doing in past as traditions, maybe those are good. We should do that. We should embrace that. Coming from Time magazine, talking to you about the Sabbath. And of course, they mentioned the Puritans. The Puritans had a famously strict work ethic, but they also took their Sundays very seriously. Yes, they did. Remember that if you had 3 on your 3rd insult to disobedience, you would be put to death. So there you go. For not observing the Sunday Sabbath, that was the American Puritanism, what it was founded on. This is from U.S. Catholic, and again, this is very recent. It's published on February. Now we're in February 2024. Imagine all these things coming out, just being blasted to you more and more just this year. It's really crazy because they're shifting the world conservatively. And this is now trying to get people into that pattern of thinking and way of doing so that they can start adopting it and the thing can come together. A new documentary makes a case for reviving the Sabbath. In 1848, Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels wrote that capitalism, with its constant revolutionizing of production, uninterrupted disturbance of all social conditions, everlasting uncertainty and agitation, was creating a world in which all fixed, fast, frozen relations with their train of ancient and venerable prejudices and opinions are swept away. All new-formed ones become antiquated before they can ossify. All that is solid melts into air. All that is holy is profane. Now, who is Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels? Who do they represent? They represent the king of the South, communism. Communism is the opposite of what? The new thing, Christian nationalism. One of the first of those ancient and venerable notions to fall before the march of capital was public observance of a Sabbath day on which all economic activity was suspended. A new 2-part documentary titled simply Sabbath, and now streaming on pbs.org, makes a compelling case that a revival of the Sabbath is needed in today's world. PBS is what? King of the North or King of the South? King of the South. They're very liberal. They're very woke. They're very on that side of on the political spectrum. But yet, here they are promoting something that is talking about Sunday observance for the beast. Do you see the problem? 2 kings eating at the same table. The opposition is just on the surface. The Bible tells you this profound truth in Daniel 11, that they eat at the same, or they speak lies at the same table, which basically you eat at the same table. Eating at the same table is a symbol of partaking together. You're basically in fellowship. So these 2 kings that are opposing one another, PBS, which is very woke, is now featuring a documentary on why Sunday might be a good thing to rest on Sunday. We need rest. So you see, this this Sunday mark is going to unify everybody. It's going to unify the liberals, the conservatives, the Protestants, the Catholics. Everybody's coming into this thing. It's truly amazing how they're doing it. And if you don't have discernment, then you will be swept along. This is titled Eco Sabbath, How to Cut Emissions by Doing Nothing on Sunday, I'm guessing. And this is also, if I can see where, let's see, it doesn't tell me the date. Anyway, this is in February sometime. But again, Eco Sabbath for the environment. This is from Breakpoint, another Christian type of website. And they're going to comment on that article that we read by the Jewish guy, Michael Koren. In the Washington Post recently, advice columnist Michael Koren argued that one way to fight climate change is to take a weekly day of rest. He called this idea a green Sabbath. We read that article, and recently, that was in, I think in January, whenever it was. But let's see what they have to say about it as commenting on it. They're also in a Christian sphere and have a lot of things to say. There's truth here. In addition to weekly personal Sabbath instituted at creation by God, the Israelites were to recognize a Sabbath rest for the earth. Which is true, but do you see how they're tying it into climate change? Every 7 years, according to Exodus 23, the Israelites were to let the fields lie fallow, and their refusal to do this was among the reasons given to the Babylonian captivity, during which, according to 2 Chronicles, God gave back to the land the Sabbath years it had missed. Still, the weekly Sabbath rest, Jesus said, was created primarily for man. The primary pattern of work and rest was established by God in the beginning when he created for 6 days and then he rested on the seventh, setting a rhythm that his image bearers and vice regents were to follow each week. Thank you. But of course, they're going to flip it on you in just a second. In other words, creation gets a rest because we were made to rest, not the other way around. In his article, Koren sort of acknowledged that the practice of a day of rest dates back more than 2,600 years and that its foundation was originally religious, not environmental. Still, the whole piece is burdened and preoccupied with the need to justify this inherently good and deeply biblical practice of rest with a nod to fighting climate change. In other words, we don't need to worry about climate change. There's plenty of reasons to follow the Sabbath. But as you'll see, for them the Sabbath is Sunday. Whenever the ultimate is instrumentalized in this way, it is evidence of how restless the secular mind is without God. There are much better arguments for seriously practicing a weekly Sabbath and how integral it is to human flourishing, to worship, and even to the effectiveness of our work the other 6 days. These arguments can be found, for example, in Matthew Sleeth's book, 24:6, A Prescription for a Healthier, Happier Life. In it, Sleeth effectively argues that God created human beings to work and to rest. God patterned that rest not for his sake, but for ours. Well, yes, but also remember that everything is a picture. God rested on the seventh day because it was a picture that Christ would rest in the tomb. Very important. On the seventh day. This is why our attempts to work all the time are, among other things, failures of trust, an unwillingness to acknowledge that God alone is all-powerful, and that we therefore are not. So again, so far, if you don't have context, it seems they're saying some good things. But you'll see very shortly. The Sabbath, just like exercise, better eating, and less coffee, is good for us because of how God made us. The strange need to justify everything with another threat of catastrophe is anything but restful. The original reasons to take a day off are better than an appeal to reducing carbon emissions. So in other words, you don't need to appeal to climate change to rest on the Sabbath. God gave us the Sabbath, which is their point. But their point is that Sunday is the Sabbath if you're a Christian. Do you see the deception? Every side tells you a little bit of the truth, and then they swing you either to the right or to the left. And these breakpoint people, again, if you look into them, do I have them here? Yeah, here we go. This is breakpoint. This is, one second. All right. This is breakpoint, and you'll see that they acknowledge that God rested this last Sabbath of the old creation. So this is another article on their website. I'm not going to read it, but what's the point? The last Sabbath of the old creation was God resting in the tomb on the seventh day, meaning now for Christians it's the first day of the week. Do you see the point? So a source that says good things, it was criticizing that previous article saying, oh, well, we don't need climate change to justify a Sabbath. The other one was for the liberals. Do you see the point? King of the South versus King of the North. The one talking about to the liberals was all about, well, maybe we should do the Sabbath thing for the environment. That's how they get you if you're a liberal. If you're a conservative, well, no, we don't need to have excuses for climate change. God has given us a Sabbath, you see, and that Sabbath for the Christian is Sunday. Oops, either to the left or to the right. This is how you walk the narrow road, folks, because the deception is going to get only worse and worse. And as time goes on, you will, again, what did Jesus say in Matthew 24? The love of many will grow cold. People will betray you. You're going to get in fights with people you know because they're going to argue these very points. So memorize them. Understand these positions so that you know what's going on and how to fight and take down these strongholds in people's minds. Because these very arguments will come up that I'm pointing out. Now, this is Project 2025, which is something I've talked about. I have a whole video on this, by the way, if you want to check it out. But we're going to briefly mention it here. It is not enough for conservatives to win elections. If we're going to rescue the country from the grip of the radical left, i.e. King of the South, we need both a governing agenda and the right people in place, ready to carry this agenda out on day one of the next conservative administration. I wonder what that agenda is. Well, you'll see very soon, but first we got to see the advisory board. A broad coalition of over 100 conservative organizations has come together to form the Project Pillars. Project 2025. It's coming, folks. Look at all these people. Look at all these conservative organizations. Very big conservative organizations. Over 100 people, 100 organizations come together into this project. This is not just a conspiracy theory. It's not just some random, whatever thing. It is a big deal because why? They're anticipating a conservative shift. Do you get the point? They wouldn't be putting so many resources into this unless this was choreographed. Meaning that Trump will win the election. Who knows how many false flags are going to happen until then. But Trump is the light bearer. Watch my Trump episode. He's going to be the one to activate this thing and move things very, very quickly because they need to be moved throughout the rest of the world as the other countries are falling in line politically as well. But if you go to their, whatever, Project Blue Book or whatever you want to, or what do you call it? Playbook. Here we go. Okay, Sabbath rest on page, what is this, page 589 of their 900-something page, whatever, manifesto. And let's read. Sabbath rest. God ordained the Sabbath as a day of rest until very recently the Judeo-Christian, you should Fennec Fox the moment you hear that term, tradition sought to honor that mandate by moral and legal regulation of work on that day. Moreover, a shared day off makes it possible for families and communities to enjoy time off together, rather than as atomized individuals, and provides a healthier cadence for life for everyone. It's good for the family. Remember Pope John Paul's 5 points? One of them was the family, returning back to, the conservative family. Of course, it's not a bad thing. God determined the family to be a man and a woman and children, but it's the devil trying to tell you how things go. Unfortunately, the communal day of rest has eroded under the pressure of consumerism and secularism. The King of the South is eating away at our values, especially for low-income workers. So they tell you all these things, and basically, alternative view, what are some things? While some conservatives believe that the government should encourage certain religious observance by making it more expensive for employers and consumers to not partake in those observances, other conservatives believe that the government's role is to protect the free exercise of religion by eliminating barriers as opposed to erecting them. Whereas imposing overtime rules on the Sabbath would lead to higher costs and limited access to goods and services and reduce work available on the Sabbath, while also incentivizing some people through higher wages to desire to work on the Sabbath, the proper role of government in helping to enable individuals to practice their religion is to reduce barriers to work options and to be fruitful employer and employee relations. The result? Ample job options that do not require work on the Sabbath, so that individuals in roles that sometimes do require work on the Sabbath are empowered to negotiate directly with their employer to achieve their desired schedule. All of this is on their agenda for Project 2025. And, of course, they have the Sabbath is Sunday somewhere in here. I forgot to read it. Here we go. Here we go. Congress should encourage communal rest by amending their Fair Labor Standards Act to require that workers be paid time and a half hours worked on the Sabbath. The golden sentence. that day would default to Sunday, except for employers with sincere religious observance of a Sabbath at a different time, Friday sundown to Saturday sundown, i.e. the Jews. The obligation would transfer to that period instead. Houses of worship, to the limited extent they are by the FLSA covered employees, and employees legally required to operate around the clock, such as hospitals and first responders, would be exempt, as would workers otherwise exempt from overtime. Now, again, remember, when Constantine decreed his law, farmers were exempt because they were, necessary workers at that time. They had to be working on Sunday. But eventually, things just got heated up. Now, from Constantine's time, it took many decades. For all those Sundays, it took over 150 years for those things to really get cemented in. We're moving much faster, folks. History goes like this, then it repeats a little faster, then faster, then faster, and faster. We're getting super fast. So when you understand that that's the sequence of things, and you see that part of Project 25's manifesto is enforcing a Sabbath and figuring out how can we make this back part of society again? Well, there's, people can get exceptions, and then people who do this on Sabbath, eventually they're going to pass the laws again. And we'll talk about this in the final part of this particular episode, but they're going to pass the laws, and they're going to squeeze a little harder and harder and harder because, again, the point is for the devil to be worshipped. Unless you rest on that day, you're not paying worship to the devil. And so this is the point. This is the goal that they have. But to get the world to that point takes a lot of incremental steps. And the devil is working very overtime to get that done. Now, this is from the Jesuit European Social Center. Very much interesting. European Sunday Alliance releases manifesto ahead of EU elections. Do you remember that day I told you to hold in the back of your brain? What day was this published? March 7th, 2024. Now, do you think that was an accident being published to you at the Jesuit European Social Center, being published to you by the European Sunday Alliance, that they're making a statement, they're publishing their manifesto on March 7th? Constantine was a pagan, and again, we don't know if he actually converted truly or not. He was born again by his deathbed, but either way, when he decreed his law, he did so as the Pontifex Maximus, as the pagan power. So why are they honoring that power with their manifesto? Because they're all in on it, folks. And if you saw my 2 Kings, 1 Table episode, you can see how Europe is swinging to the right. Everything is moving to the right and getting ready for this new thing to happen politically. March 3rd marked the annual European Day for a Work-Free Sunday, and this year the European Sunday Alliance is seizing the opportunity to unveil its manifesto for the upcoming election. So you have European Sunday Alliance, you have the Lord's Day Alliance in the United States, you have the Canadian Sabbath Alliance. I mean, these are all just little Jesuit enclaves of Jesuit operatives, of Protestant operatives, of secret society members that are all working together through a diffusion of networks that is impossible to connect. But again, if you know what the Bible tells you, that the Catholic Church is the mother of abominations, then you don't need to do all the homework. It's very easy to see. A diffusion of networks that seems like everybody's coming together just authentically, when in reality it's a stage. All the world is a stage. As we observe the significance of synchronizing rest time on this day, the European Sunday Alliance underscores its role as a potent tool in combating loneliness and promoting the mental well-being of workers. Again, if you're approaching people from the King of the South, i.e. secularism, the approach is always going to be secular. Mental health, better for your stress, better for the environment. The liberals and the atheists can get on board with that. If you're approaching it from the King of the North, i.e. the Project 2025, what are they appealing to? Well, back in the good old days when, America was a conservative nation and we got to get back to good old values. So it depends what side, but it's always, all roads lead to Rome. That saying is more true than people realize. All roads truly do lead to Rome. With the EU elections scheduled for June 2024, the European Sunday Alliance urges members of the European Parliament and election candidates to throw their support behind the elections manifesto crafted by the steering committee. This manifesto emphasizes the importance of establishing a weekly common day of rest, people, traditionally observed on Sundays. Yeah, we'll go with tradition instead, not with what God says. At the EU level for all citizens. All citizens. On this auspicious occasion, the European Sunday Alliance is heartened by the endorsement of a work-free Sunday by a coalition of MEPs from diverse political backgrounds. Among these supporters are notable figures such as, Italy, Germany, Romania, Germany, Austria, Czech Republic. So a lot of people are behind this. This is not just some little rinky-dink organization that started yesterday. Additionally, we extend our gratitude to Miriam Lexman, Slovakia, a sponsor of the European Sunday Alliance, for her steadfast support. As we move forward, let us collectively recognize the importance of a dedicated day of rest for all Europeans and work towards its realization at the European level. Remember, well, if you saw the other episode, the Two Kings, One Table, the bishops are urging people to vote so that they can bring about their idea of Europe. It's fascinating stuff. It really is. I mean, again, if you know your history, then this is fascinating stuff. The European Sunday Alliance is a network of more than 100 national alliances, kind of like Project 2025, huh? Trade unions, civil society organizations, and religious communities committed to raise awareness of the unique value of synchronized free time for our European societies. You notice the language, synchronized free time. That's the way that people can think about it from their secular upbringing. But Europe was a Christian nationalist continent for over 1,400 years. The European Sunday Alliance is coordinated by a steering committee comprising of the following organizations. And it tells you right here, look at all these organizations. There's a list of 4 pages of them. Just like with Project 2025, these are big movements, people. Very big movements. Now, one more thing I want to talk to you about just really briefly. We looked at this in a previous episode, which is this map of the world. Now, this map of the world is basically showing you where is this, what day is Sunday considered? So where it's blue is Sunday is considered the first day of the week, i.e. what Constantine decreed. However, where it's beige, Sunday is considered the 7th day of the week. So this is an interesting dialectic to me. I don't know how it will resolve, because the ultimate thing is this. The devil's not going to make you rest on the 7th day, because that honors God. So if you recall from the episode previous to this, in episode 7, where you had the history of Saturday and Sunday, prior to 8321, there was a dialectic going on. There was a dialectic of the 8-day calendar and the 7-day calendar in the Roman Empire. The 8-day calendar was not working. And the 7-day, they were kind of clashing against each other. And so this pushed people more to like, okay, we need a solution. So Constantine came around and actualized that solution into the new calendar, which made Sunday the first day of the week. Now, half of the world, let's say, in this case, sees Sunday as the 7th day of the week. Now, the interesting thing will be, again, we know that the United States is the false prophet that is deceiving the world into adopting the image of the beast, which, again, image is a representation of the beast. The beast was what? A Christian nationalist power. Meaning, the United States will convince the world that adopting this system again is a good thing. In the United States, if we go back to this little map, you can see that the United States considers Sunday as the first day of the week. They're still in line with the old Roman system that's been around since 321 AD. But the rest of the world needs to come along. So I wonder if this will be a dialectic where they will push to say, you know what, we need to get a world calendar. See where this is going? We need to synchronize the world so that it's all the same. Because some people are on the 7th day, Sunday is the 7th day. We can't do that. We need to decide on a one, day of the week, one calendar. So I'm wondering if this will be something to watch for, is countries shifting their calendar to the Constantinian calendar, which is what the United States observes, and Canada, South America, India, some of these places, South Africa. That will be something to watch. I really wonder, because I doubt that they're going to. Now, another possibility, I don't think it's a great possibility, but another possibility will be that they will push for Sunday being the 7th day of the week. And then you got to rest on Sunday. But again, I doubt that, because they would be using the Bible to support their views, and they would change the calendar and then make you rest on the day that God told you to rest on, which is the 7th day of the week. Remember, pagan name days don't mean anything. They don't mean anything. It's the sequence of days that matters. God says rest on the seventh day. So I don't think that is very likely, but it could be. But again, there's a difference. There's a difference here, and they need to pay homage to their master, which is on the first day, which honors the sun. These places that are honoring Sunday as the seventh day of the week, they need to change. They need to get with the times, because if people rest in those days, in those countries on Sunday, they're resting on the seventh day of the week for them. Do you get the point? So I don't know how that's going to work. It'll be interesting to see what's going on, because the world is divided as to how they reckon Sunday in terms of, is it the seventh day of the week? Is it the first day of the week? In the United States, we reckon it as the first day of the week, like Constantine decreed. I am assuming that that will be exported to the rest of the world. As these things shift from dark to light, as the politics change, and everybody accepts this new political system that is ready for a new spiritual system as well. So that's current events, and now let's put it all together. Okay, well, what a trip, right? What a trip through history and through current events. And ultimately, look, these things are going to get faster and faster and hotter. So one thing I will encourage you to do is that if you find these types of articles, send them to me. You can email me at tudor@danceoflife.com, because going forward, my goal will be to monitor this situation. These things are very important for us to monitor and to understand the pace that they are going at. But as you can see, things are moving very fast, and it's incredibly well coordinated. It truly is. It's astounding, actually. But out of the last 2,000 years of church history, 1,400 have been Christian nationalists. You have to get present to that reality, that Christians were persecuted by others calling themselves Christians for not obeying the authority of the church, which is really given to it by the dragon. Revelation, the book of Revelation, warned that Christians would be oppressed by this counterfeit power. The Catholic system persecuted people throughout the ages for not obeying its authority, through Sunday laws, through just persecution, burning at the stake, the Reformations, the Inquisition, the Crusades. There's hundreds and hundreds of years of persecution history with the Catholic system. The Catholic system has boasted about its mark of authority, that it's changed the times has changed the Sabbath from Saturday to Sunday, i.e. the seventh day to the first day of the week. And the Bible warns that the Catholic Church will come back in power at the end of time, i.e. Revelation 17, where the kings of the earth give their power to the woman. So what does that mean? Well, we have historical precedent. We have a biblical precedent. There's motivation for this to happen. And there's relevant evidence that proves that it has happened in the past. Through Sunday laws, throughout all of history. I literally covered 2,000 years of history with you today. That shows you beyond a shadow of a doubt that these things will happen again. Now the question is, what are you going to do with this information? Are you going to remain complacent? Are you going to brush it off aside and say, oh, no, that'll never happen. That's ridiculous. It's a conspiracy theory. Or will you embrace it, learn the truth about the Sabbath, begin practicing the Sabbath, understand how to defend your beliefs about the Sabbath, start watching the right things so you understand changes politically and spiritually that are happening, and help others learn the truth as well. The Sabbath is God's mark. It's his sign with his people. Sunday is going to be Satan's mark. It already is, but really it's not being enforced. If you think about it, Sunday is the exact inversion of God's law. And that's how we know it's the counterfeit, because it's got Satan's signature all over it. Now, how does that figure? Well, the places in Exodus where God commands the Sabbath, everywhere you look, it's always in a particular relationship of two things. 6 days you shall work, 1 day you shall rest. What is the order? The order is 6 days first, 1 day rest. You rest on the seventh day. Satan is telling you to do the opposite. Rest 1 day, work 6 days. See how that works? Because you got to rest on Sunday, the first day of the week, and then work 6 days. It's literally an inversion of the truth. And so you know that Satan inverts everything that God does. So this is just another proof of the fact that it is a satanic conversion. Those who ignore history will be swept up in it. I hope you're not one of them. You have to understand the Sabbath. You have to watch these other episodes. If this is your first one in my series, watch the series. Be practiced and be well-versed and help others learn the truth. Now, the question is, how is it going to happen? What does it look like in the near future? Well, time will tell. We do not have all the answers. We have enough to know what to watch and to be discerning, but time will tell. Things are moving very fast, so keep your eyes out. Again, if you find things that are relevant to Sunday legislation, Sunday news, email them to me. I like to collect them and I'll use them for regular updates. But keep yourself informed and ultimately understand that this is where things are headed. Now, the first step that I see is that right now they're flipping everything from dark to light, i.e. from the king of the south or secularism to a conservative world government throughout these various nations. I've covered that in my 2 Kings episode, 2 Kings 1 Table, Dark to Light. I've covered that in Dark to Light China. I've covered that in my episode number 22 of my End Time series. I have a whole column in my Substack, my website, danceoflife.com, dedicated to Christian nationalism. So I've covered this over and over again. Europe, South America, China, USA, everybody is switching from the evil big bad left, woke, communist is going to force you to, get a sex change and eat crickets type of government to we need to get back to we the people and good old-fashioned values. We are changing from dark to light. Now that is the first thing that needs to happen because that political shift will set the stage for culture to change and to infiltrate. When I'm talking culture, I mean the American culture. All these false signs and wonders of the chosen, mega churches, this charismatic movement, all this fake Christianity. They'll have the appearance of godliness, but denying the power thereof. It's a fake Christianity. It's the new thing, but really it's going to be the old thing just repackaged. That is going to infiltrate all of these cultures and bring the new thing to life. Because again, the United States is the false prophet. The United States' job is to convince the world and deceive them to adopt this image and to worship it. So right now, politically, everything is changing. Europe has been secular for a very long time, but Europe was Christian nationalist for even much longer time. Nevertheless, people in this generation grew up very secular, so they need to be reminded. So they've been pushed on by the bad cop quite a bit. So then the good cop is now saying, look, we need to rest, guys. We need to have maybe traditional values. Maybe that is the good thing. And people are migrating to that direction. And then America will sweep in with its culture of Christian nationalism, that it's all charismatic Christian personal growth, emergent church type of Christian doctrine that is just nothing. It's really just a Jesuit psyop designed to bring everybody into observance under the Catholic system. Doesn't mean you're going to convert to Catholicism. I don't know what the final thing will be. Maybe it'll be just one big mystery religion, who knows? But it will be a false Christianity. Either way, the Pope is going to be behind the scenes ruling from this pulpit because that's what the Bible tells you. The kings of the earth will give their power to the woman. The woman specifically is the Catholic Church. There's no way getting around that. It's more than obvious. But this is the first step, is political changes. Then step 2, America will lead the way after 2024. Obviously, they're getting ready with Project 2025, all this conservative push. There's a lot of things happening. America is the linchpin. That's where the alchemy will happen. Of course, Trump is the light bearer for that situation. Watch my Trump episode. But that's step 2. Right now, they're getting everything politically ready. And then when America shifts and starts bringing in the new culture, the new policies, that will start getting exported to the rest of the world. Now, step 3, and again, I don't know the time between these, but I'm guessing within the next 5 years, you're going to see a lot of these things come to pass, my guess. Step 3 is this. They will have to get the world on one calendar. Like I said with that map that we looked at, they have to get everybody to recognize Sunday as the first day. That's going to honor their sun god, which is really Lucifer. And it's going to synchronize everybody away from the seventh day because they don't want people resting on the seventh day. So this is an interesting dialectic, and it'll be something to watch because, again, to me, it reminds me of the dialectic before Constantine, where there was 2 Roman calendars in the empire. And so they had to standardize it. So my guess is probably they're going to try to push for some world calendar. Now that we're all on the same page with this conservative stuff and the king of the south has been conquered, the big bad deep space has been taken care of, then, let's all get on one calendar, one people. And of course, by then everybody's probably gonna be Christian. So one body of Christ, we should all be on the same calendar. Do you see the point? That's what I anticipate happening to some degree, but we'll see. It's an interesting situation. Now, one thing I want to pose is very important. This is not about going to church on Sunday. If you're going to church on Sunday, you have not taken the mark of the beast. So do not panic. Do not feel that worshiping God on Sunday is somehow not allowed. You can worship God on any day of the week. This is going to be about resting on Sunday. Now, the question is, how are they going to enforce it? But either way, it's about resting and counterfeiting God's provision as the Savior, as the Creator, and as the provider. That is what it's about. Going to church on Sunday will be part of it. I'm sure maybe there'll be some way that they're going to tie that in, but it's really about acknowledging a counterfeit God, which is the whole point. Either way, once the world agrees on Sunday as the first day of the week, which I'm guessing has to be a prerequisite, there will be either a Sunday for the environment or whatever other case, but doesn't matter. There will be a Sunday of the first day of the week to honor their pagan system. First, they're going to create laws to prohibit work, probably. So they're pro-resting laws, like as you've seen, the history of many laws. Don't do this, don't do that, and eventually it's going to get even more and more tight. They're going to start with things that make sense. Oh, let's not do this, let's not do that, and it's going to get more and more prohibitory to work on Sunday. Eventually, once those things are very cemented, again, remember it took about 150 years between Constantine's law and I forget which Roman emperor it was, but anyway, before they started, really persecuting people in the Roman Empire for Sunday observance. It took about 150 years. We're moving much faster. So when you see the first law, this first Sabbath law about resting, know for certain that within a couple of years from there, who knows, you will see laws eventually against the Sabbath itself. So at first they're going to have pro-resting laws. Don't do this, don't do that. It's good for the family, encourage with all the propaganda and the culture to get back to nationalist values around Sunday. And then eventually, once there's a new generation and there's adoption worldwide, that's when the snake is going to start showing his teeth a little bit and saying, you know what, now that we've all have come to this truth, there are going to be laws against keeping Saturday as the Sabbath. And that's when you really should perk your ears up, because that means the end is very close. So the one thing to watch for is not so much that they're going to make laws to prohibit work on Sunday, because that has happened throughout history. And of course, you can see even from Project 2025, they're going to do that as soon as they come into office. The thing to watch for is when they start making laws against the Sabbath. Again, like they said in Constantine's time with Theodosius, those who are Judaizing will be shut out from Christ. Well, don't be. If you start seeing those types of things, then things are heating up and getting closer and closer to the return of Christ, because ultimately this is what's happening. It's once they start chopping heads or whatever they're going to do, then the time is very close. But right now, it's more about propaganda to switch politics throughout the world, and also propaganda in the United States to fuse this false Christian nationalist culture with, things like mega churches, prosperity, preaching, all the false light system. That's what this is about. Now, the question is, how is it going to be enforced? How are they actually going to enforce this? And that's something to really ponder. It's hard to say because we aren't there yet. And ultimately, it is a tricky thing. Like, how are they going to enforce rest? But you remember that they did enforce, people were telling on each other back in Constantine's day, oh, did you see him? He's celebrating the Sabbath. And they got arrested. What did Jesus say? People will betray one another. There's going to come a time when the people that are close to you or that you know are so fanatically deceived by this system that if you identify yourself as against the system, what is stopping them from telling on you? Who knows how it's going to be? Again, history repeats itself. Do not dismiss these things because history does repeat itself. Now, the Bible does say that you won't be able to buy or sell. And that's a marker that, to me, is very clearly suggesting that there will be a digital monetary system. Now, we're already well into that with all this crypto stuff. Everything's online now. Everything's on an app. Your life depends on your phone. And that's by design, because at some point they're just going to hit a button and shut you out from society. That's the future. We know that. That's not just a communist dystopia from the globalists. Remember, the woman rides the beast. The woman reins it in. The beast is this communist system. It's this one world, technological, secular system. And that's going to be reined in by the woman, the Catholic Church, and used for her dirty deeds. All this talk about AI and the evils of the left, all this stuff is just theater. It's designed to be developed and then eventually be used by the beast after the woman conquers the beast. Or I should say the king of the north conquers the king of the south. After one side, the light, conquers the dark, they're going to use all the dark's tools to enforce their false day of worship, which, like blockchain, social credit scores, social profiles, all these things already exist. It's not a stretch of the imagination to imagine what the world would be like in Constantine's day and age, but with blockchain. Think about it from that perspective. That's what's going to happen. A lot of people will dismiss that, but again, if you know your history, the dark is going to help the light. The globalist system is there to be destroyed, but what it is creating will be integrated by the woman and be used. So this is something people don't realize. You think like Trump is going to come to power and suddenly there's not going to be any more monitoring of your social profile online or, social credit score or anything like that? Absolutely not. They will find a way to justify it, believe me. And they'll justify it by using, false flags or pinning the problem on the big, bad, evil left. You don't want to be like them. So yeah, we want to see your allegiance to these values. Either way, the Catholic teaching throughout history has always been that if you are not a member of the church, you cannot be saved. Remember, they'll be shut out from Christ. Back in Constantine's day, all the way to John Paul, same approach. You cannot be saved if you are not part of the Catholic system. Of course, that's a lie. You are saved if you are out of the Catholic system. Now, I don't mean people who are Catholics are damned. I'm just saying that's not the true church. That is not the true church. And so the question is, if that becomes the dominant power, which the Bible says it will, and it enforces worship at the price of being shut out from Christ, what does it mean if you're shut out from Christ in a worldwide Christian nationalist system? Well, it means you'll probably have to show proof of membership to this new thing somehow. You might have to have membership being contingent on going to church, like they did with the Puritans. Remember, you got to go to church in the morning and evening. If you don't show proof. Today with your QR code, did you go to Mass in the morning and in the evening? It sounds so crazy. It really does. But look, you got to learn your history. You have to learn the history is a cyclical thing. It goes, nothing is new. There's nothing new under the sun. History repeats itself. What has been will be again. This is what the Bible tells you. So take it seriously. We look at the Puritans and say, oh, how barbaric that they would threaten people upon death if they didn't go to church twice a day on Sundays. Well, that's the last of the 2,000 years have been kind of like that. So you need to realize where you're coming from. This whole secular thing of humanism and, secularism and atheism, this was a temporary glitch. It was very intentional, but it was just a temporary thing designed to bring you back to the mother church, bring you back to all those glory days of Sunday persecution. It was a necessary step for them because the Reformation was a real thorn in their side. The advancement of AI and everything will also be used to track behavior because, again, AI is being developed for that very purpose. Why do you think they're pushing all this AI stuff? The phones have AI now. The computer processors have AI. Everything's got AI. It's designed to make a one-world system that can track you and determine whether you should be able to buy or sell or not. It's designed to monitor future behavior on a level that is profound. Now, it says no buying in the in the scriptures in Revelation, it says no buying or selling unless you have the mark. And an interesting point here is that in the Greek, charagma is the word for mark. However, charagma is the character, the word that we get character from, which is an interesting point, because in a way it's kind of telling you those who have the mark, or i.e. the character of the beast, will be the ones participating in this system. Well, what is the character of the beast? The character of the beast is rebellion. It is thinking that you can change God's laws. And if you believe that, like all of those deceived Christians that I read articles to you from, either believing that the Sabbath has been done away with, so, whatever, we can just do whatever we want now. We can just pick our day of Sabbath. Maybe we should do Sunday because that's church tradition. Or those who staunchly uphold Sunday, even though they're Protestant, and they forget that the Protestants were condemned by the Council of Trent for upholding Sunday. And they lost the Reformation because of that. But yet they forget it because they don't study their history. But they're Protestant. So either one doesn't matter. People forget their history. And they will have the character of the beast. Not a physical mark, but the mark of obedience to the devil rather than obedience to God. That's the character. You're going to espouse the beast's character of deciding what the law is on. What is the one commandment of Satanism? Do you know? It's do as thou wilt is the whole of the law. That is the command of Satanism. Do whatever you want. You're the one who sets the law. Well, if that's the case, then you can choose whatever day you rest on, right? Doesn't matter what God said. This is the character of Lucifer. This is the character of rebellion, to invert what God does and to say, I am the one who determines the law. I am the one who determines creation and provision and salvation. It's the ultimate blasphemy. And of course, people will be deceived into it thinking it's a good thing, so they will adopt the character of the beast. Do you understand? Maybe it might involve church attendance being mandatory. Maybe you'll need to show proof of attendance. Maybe you'll need to show proof that you aren't doing any work on Sunday. Maybe they're going to track things and have little apps on your phone that say, oh, you travel a little bit too much with your car. Maybe you might get fined because of carbon credits, or who knows? Who really knows? I mean, it's too early in the game to say that, but things are moving very fast, so you know what to pay attention to. It's a mystery as to how they will enforce it, but you know that they will enforce it for sure. At the very least, with economic sanctions. In the past, Sunday has been enforced through membership in the church, coming to church on Sunday, persecuting those who did work on Sunday, persecuting those who kept Sabbath on Saturday. So these things, there's historical precedent. Now take all of that history that I read to you today and multiply it by crypto, blockchain, social ID, social credit score, online banking, cell phones. Just multiply it with all that and see what you get. That's the answer. I'm personally glad I work for myself because it's given me a lot more flexibility. I'm grateful to God that I've had the ability to do that. Because remember with COVID, when that whole first test was done, which again, they work together, two kings at the same table. That was the dark pulling that off. But the dark was also helping the light because the light could see, okay, how are people going to respond to a worldwide mandate? And people responded. And if you were part of an employment situation of an institution, you were part of the first people that had to be bowing down to the system. Do you get my point? So my point is, if you can, find a way that you can make income that doesn't depend on a corporation or the medical system or these big institutions, because these places are going to be the first to enforce such mandates. They really will. You have to learn to diversify your income, have multiple streams of income, find ways to make income outside of just, working at a job, working for an institution, because they will be the first place to mandate such things. And it'll be very interesting to see how they do that. But ultimately, they changed the world with COVID, and they tested compliance. And they're going to do that over and over again. So that by the time the light comes in and has their thing to implement, they have already had plenty of data. See the point? They're two kings at the same table. You have to build also relationships with like-minded believers. Share these truths with them. Wake people up to this truth. Please do. You have to realize that history is repeating itself. And you have to take it upon yourself, now that you know the truth, to help others, form little communities, keep each other in contact, stay in touch. This is how we can build the original church, right? Which was just a decentralized community of faithful believers. And that original church was always persecuted. So nothing new under the sun. Eventually, internet will probably be shut off. That's why they're moving everything online and making everything depend on the internet. So get ready for that too. Ultimately, what is coming is much worse than COVID, much worse than anything, because that's what the Bible says. It says that this is the final thing, and that final thing is on the horizon. People will be betraying each other. There'll be a lot of false teachings, false converts, false prophets, false doctrines. It'll be a new thing that's going to sweep the world. And right now we are at the precipice. We're at the precipice of this thing. Politically, everything is shifting from dark to light. And you will see in the years that are coming, we're not talking 20 years, we're talking 5 to 10 years, you're going to see massive changes on this front. It's a crazy time to be alive, but look, again, the faster these things go, the better. It really is. Rejoice as things get more evil and crazier. We can rejoice even more and more because we're getting closer. Remember, Jesus said that the days were shortened for the sake of the elect so that people would be left alive, meaning once you see them enforcing anti-Sabbath laws and throwing people into prison and, whatever, coming after people, then you know the time is very near. So rejoice. The brilliance of God is that as evil rises, it reminds us of our election. It reminds us that God is sovereign. It reminds us that God is providential, that he's going to save us, and that he's coming very soon.